parents who took safety way too far. These rules are insane. Not allowed to leave the house without being accompanied by an adult, even in their late teens. Not allowed to use a steak knife, and mom had to cut their meat. Not allowed to use a can opener. Not allowed to use the stove, deep fryer, or oven, even during late teens. I think that's everything about my childhood. Phew, I hope you get out regularly. I had a similar upbringing and spent a good chunk of my 20s with agoraphobia because I didn't know how to deal with anything and had been removed from school in my early teens. Good news is that you can overcome all of that silly bullcrap. You just have to push yourself and learn the things that you didn't get a chance to learn. My mum was totally mental and wanted me to be helpless and unable to interact with the outside world, just so I'd have to stay home and she wouldn't ever have to be alone. Always keep in mind that that was their mental illness and not yours. Sending hugs. I worked at a summer camp for a lot of years. You meet a lot of different folks with some interesting ideas of what is and isn't appropriate. One time, a concerned mum came up to me at the end of the day and asked if she could have a word. "I'm concerned about some of the language I've heard the other kids using," she said. "I'm wondering why you aren't doing anything about it." I assured her that we do have a camp-appropriate language policy and that we enforce it. I asked her what she had heard. She told me in hushed tones that she overheard one of the kids saying that something or other was stupid. She described it with the discomfort a normal person might exhibit when they catch a stray F or C word. She was genuinely scandalized that a group of 6 through 11-year-old kids called things stupid. I mean, I have quite a few crazy PC parent stories, but I just can't wrap my head around a woman in her middle 30s who considers the word stupid to be a profanity. There are parents these days who seriously try to protect their kids from any expression of negativity or disdain directed at anyone or anything. Baffling. That was my mom. There were some very tame words that meant we weren't supposed to hang out with other kids who used them or watch or read media that contained those words. I pretty much had to watch preschool cartoons throughout my whole childhood because everything written for my age was banned. Stupid, dumb, butt, pee, poop, and fart were all forbidden words. Hey, you watch your damn stupid language. In seriousness, that is whack, and I think restricting the way kids talk past a reasonable level can have a real negative effect on their development. Sure, inform them about how their words can hurt people, and tell them that there are consequences for hurting or upsetting people, but don't lock them away just for saying poopy. Not allowed to watch G-rated movies. G-movies, otherwise known as gangster movies, are corrupting today's youth. My kids watched 8 Mile and wanted to drop fresh beats for a week. I told them the only thing they were dropping was that potty mouth. I heard that movie American History G has a pretty rough scene where Edward Norton makes some kid bite down on a big piece of cotton candy, and it makes him really uncomfortable. I had extremely religious neighbors in middle school who were part of the carpool that took all of the kids in the neighborhood to school. One morning I got in their car and was promptly asked by the mum to remove my jean jacket because it had a newly sewn-on Led Zeppelin patch on it, and their children weren't allowed to be around devil music. Mind you, I wasn't playing any music, and the patch was just the band's logo. How they even knew who Led Zeppelin was is beyond me. But anyways, that was enough to qualify for possibly polluting their perfect little brood's delicate sensibilities. It was like living next to a real-life Flanders family. The choice of, well, you can't watch this on TV, was always so weird to me. Like the Wild Thornberrys? Why? And all the Christian reactions against Halloween? Like that kids need to do some corny alternative with their church and can't dress up as anything satanic like a vampire. My mom taught elementary school and they had to stop doing Halloween decorations and costume day because a gaggle of Christian moms started accusing the school of teaching Satan worship. My mom was teed off. I taught a student who was a firstborn son of an Indian family. This meant he was treated like a little prince. His folks let him get away with all sorts of drinking and partying and substances, and just general crappy behavior to the point that I nearly kicked him out of our program. Day of the competition arrives and we're at the courthouse. The kids can only have water in the courtrooms, which is fine because we get them all water bottles. About halfway through the day, his mum came up to me and asked for another bottle. I didn't have one, but I pointed her in the direction of the water fountain to refill his current bottle. She told me he couldn't drink water that was also drunk by people who committed crimes. She wasn't worried about the cleanliness of the water, she just didn't want him drinking from the same fountain as alleged criminals. Mock trial, by the way. Not real criminals. Not allowed in a car with anyone who isn't family. To clarify, I asked her if her family could possibly give me a ride home from school, since my house was the way for them, and she was getting a ride home. They said no because they don't want anyone who's not family in the car. Then she was stuck and I offered her a ride and she said she'd ask her parents. She called and they said no because I'm not family. I went to school with a girl who wasn't allowed to participate in any extracurricular activities at school whatsoever. After years of begging, her parents finally caved and let her play basketball. One night, after a game, no one picked her up. The coach was required to wait until all the students had been picked up before she could leave. Finally, after waiting for over 3 hours, the coach drove her home. When she arrived, the parents rushed out of the house, threatening to sue the coach for having a student in her car. It was weird. Needless to say, the girl moved far, far away as soon as she turned 18. My significant other's son wasn't allowed to eat Snickers bars until the age of 11 because of nuts. He isn't allergic to nuts, she just didn't want him to eat them because he might choke. His mother, as you'd expect, has a lot of rules, but this is the one I remember the most. I had a camper whose mum informed me that their child was to have no gluten, caffeine, sugar, or peanut products. No problem, we have kids with crazy allergies all the time. Then I found out the kid had 0 allergies and the mum just wanted her to eat that way. It's a 6-day camp, let your kid eat a s'more. I had another parent who insisted his kid be covered head to toe in sun-protective clothing all day, every day. I like to think that all day, every day means even during sleep. Like, don't think you can take off your sun hat and sunglasses just because you're going to bed. My cousin's second husband's grandkids weren't allowed to watch anything other than VeggieTales, because they were good Christian folk. I wasn't aware of this, and at a Christmas party when I was 10 or 11, put on Lord of the Rings and they wandered in. When their mum found them watching it, you would have thought I was showing them how to worship Satan with the amount of fuss she made. Wonder how good at Christians they became when their grandpa ran off with 2 lesbians because God told me to save them. When I was a kid, there was this boy named Matt at our school, and his mother was an over-the-top Christian. He was never allowed to watch any movies, ever, and most of the lesson plans were vetted extensively by his mother. Frankly, I'm surprised he wasn't homeschooled. The one thing that I remembered was that he wasn't allowed to check out a book from the library unless he called his mother, who apparently called some other number to see if the book was not acceptable. So he had to put books on reserve and leave a voice message with his mother and pick the books up on Friday if he was allowed to take them home. Reading about all of the wacko Christians on here saddens me, because I'm a Christian myself and I don't go for any of this nonsense. Yeah, I knew any number of kids from church who could basically do whatever they wanted and had loving Christian homes. Unlike a lot of these awful caricatures of Christian families. Do better, guys. A lady I knew wouldn't let her 5-year-old use a spoon because she thought he'd swallow it, but a fork was perfectly fine. I'm still confused about this. Simple. If you swallow a spoon, you spend 90 seconds in a sheer panic before you succumb to hypoxia and/or massive irreversible brain damage and remain on life support for 20 years until everyone who can tell the doctors not to is also dead, so they can finally pull the plug. If you swallow a fork, it punches through into your spinal column and you die instantly. My cousin was not allowed to drink water half an hour before or after dinner. She was also not allowed to drink water while eating dinner. The reason for this? It would apparently slow down digestion and cause stomach and/or colon cancer. What? You're only allowed to listen to Disney radio because all other music will make you violent. This was said all the time to my best friend's nephew. He grew up to be in one of the biggest motorcycle clubs in California. Damn you, Disney radio. Sleep alone. They're worried that they'll get separation anxiety if they put them to bed alone at night, so the parents sleep with their 2 kids every night. The kids are a little older now, one 4 and one 6, so now the parents are each sleeping with 1 kid in separate beds. As some constructive criticism, I asked if maybe on the flip side the kids will be dependent on the parents sleeping with them when they're say 12 or 13 years old. They didn't want to hear that. In my opinion, this is bad for the kids and bad for marriage. Also, I can't imagine when or where the parents do the deed, but I won't ask about that part. A 5th grader wasn't allowed to watch Wall-E because their parents didn't believe in global warming. Did they believe in trash piling up? Because that's the only reason why they left in the movie. One could easily see the underlying message though. You know, the one about being responsible for our own environment. My wife and I watched a kid who had a mum that wouldn't allow him to say motorcycle. She said it was too close to the word mother effer. We thought maybe he somehow made it sound like mother effer, so we had him say it. He said it, and it sounded like motorcycle. I still don't understand the ban on that word to this day. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. Don't forget to subscribe to Am I the Genius? My mum wouldn't allow us to watch Nickelodeon as a kid. That alone isn't crazy. However, we lived in a trailer park, the neighbors cooked Crystal, our babysitter was a known escort, and her boyfriend grew Mary J. Good one, Mum. Thanks for saving us from frickin' Nick TV. I wasn't allowed to play Dungeons & Dragons. Apparently it was satanic. My grandmother vehemently proclaimed Pokemon was demonic, because of that one Porygon episode that gave kids seizures. I remembered that there was also a misinformation campaign against D&D with people pretending to be cult members, claiming that there were rituals and such in D&D, and that it was a recruitment tool. Allowed to go only 50 feet from the house after 6 p.m., and only on foot. He's 23. Not allowed to watch Lilo and Stitch because it goes against their beliefs. Motherfricker, you're watching a frickin' movie about two characters being awesome to each other and showing that love and family can outreach even the most outside sources. Get the frick off of your soapbox. There was a family we knew growing up where Batman was a bad word. I never understood that one. I was only allowed to have 30 minutes of internet time per week until grade 7 or 8. This lasted until I was 16, well after I got my own laptop. Joke's on them though, I'd been watching naughty movies on my 3DS and later my phone for years at that point. Oh, and my phone was totally unrestricted, so I don't know what the source of their bullcrap was. Yeah, most parents don't realize that the 3DS has a browser. My wife wasn't allowed to watch the Rugrats growing up. She has a sneaking suspicion that it was because they were Jewish. Also, she wasn't allowed to watch Care Bears or the Smurfs because they had black magic in them. My sister is a helicopter parent who says their children can't watch SpongeBob because it challenges the sanctity of gender roles. This would make more sense if she had a problem with how much body horror that show gets away with. My aunt listens to every single song my cousin purchases to make sure it's clean. He's 13, and this is just one of the many weird things she's protective over. But I'm just appalled that some people still think music is a danger developmentally. I wasn't allowed to watch Power Rangers or Beetleborgs as a kid because I'm a girl. My parents tell me I can't watch naughty movies or have fun with myself because either will become an addiction that will cause my life to fall apart, leaving me homeless and doing it with strangers for spare change for a Happy Meal. I used to work at a place with this woman, and sometimes she'd bring her daughter to work. The office dynamic allowed for that. But she wouldn't let any of the adults say stupid in front of her daughter and would scold them in front of everyone for saying it. It was stupid. Yeah, Denise, I said stupid. Sheltered conservative Christian childhood checklist. PG-13 and under only. Forced 7 a.m. church attendance on Sundays. Exclusively oldies and Christian rock music. No dating or one-on-one time with the opposite gender. No unchaperoned hangouts with friends. No cursing, not even Bible curses like hell or damn. No clothing with violent cartoon or video game characters on it. No video games with blood or violence. No forms of media with anything that could be misconstrued as occult themes. No cable television. Pretending doing the deed doesn't exist and never talking about it. Not being allowed to have black, queer, or non-Christian friends. And church summer camp. I'm pretty sure the environment my parents created turned me into the exact opposite of the child they wanted. No, wait, I was wrong. It was at least partially the internet strangers that corrupted me. I love you, internet strangers. I was actually deliberating whether to include that last bit, lest future helicopter parents hear it and take away the wrong message and ban their kids from the internet. Let me tell you folks, although there's nothing inherently wrong with being on the internet, depriving your kids of social contact or regular social avenues is exactly the kind of thing that might drive them into finding the deepest, darkest recesses of this place whenever they get access to a computer. And they will get that access eventually, through friends, libraries, school, or just hiding an old second-hand junker under the floorboards. You can't stop it, so teach them to use it safely instead. I guess kind of related? Last year I was sitting at home playing Splatoon. My grandmother lives with us and happened to come upstairs while I was kicking ads in tower control. She kind of stands there for a minute and then says, "I don't know how anyone could enjoy something so violent." This is the same woman who keeps blocking my 13-year-old twin cousins, who she has custody over, from getting an Xbox because other games on the console are violent. My fiancée is about to move out of her parents' house and into mine after our wedding. Her parents had a go at her about it. Their big argument was that her younger sister would be home alone a lot of the time now and might not cope. Her younger sister is 25 and a registered nurse. She's also so overprotected she honestly may not cope anyway. Needs a bit of love, in my opinion. This kid in my school was a vegetarian. Even still, I managed to look past his chicken nuggetless lifestyle and became friends. Went to his house one day for a playdate and found out his mum didn't allow him to watch TV. Not just no violent programs or anything fair like that, I mean no TV at all. I mean, there was one TV in the house and that was for the mum in her room. Sometimes I feel really sorry for that kid. I wasn't allowed to use the kitchen to bake because I'll make a mess. I was 28 at the time. My cousin told me her daughter, who was 5 and perfectly healthy, wasn't allowed to walk down or upstairs on her own. We were trying to play hide-and-go-seek, but she was told she couldn't play because the counter hid a few steps down the stairs? This woman generally treats her children like they're made of blown glass, but the stairs? What the hell? The neighbor's boy liked to carry a banana in his hand around the house or outdoors. He'd cock it and then aim his banana at people as if it were a piece and start shooting. His mum got worried that it was encouraging bad behavior and made him stop touching bananas unless he intended it for its true purpose. We couldn't watch The Simpsons because Bart was disrespectful, but also because it made me and my sister get along and work together to secretly watch it on this crappy little black and white TV. My mum was pretty devious. My husband wasn't allowed to celebrate with Santa, the Easter Bunny, no Halloween, no Tooth Fairy, because the devil. His mum asked if we were planning on celebrating Santa style. I said no, we're using Krampus. Not allowed to watch someone cook meat. A Muslim child wasn't allowed to watch The Simpsons as they sometimes had depictions of God. Which is weird as the Muslim God and Christian God are the same God. Jesus is even a figure in Islam. Worked at a summer camp. One kid had to sleep facing east. He told me that his mum made him sleep this way and that it was to improve his chi. Not allowed to be vaccinated. Anti-vaxxers are some of the worst people there are for kids' safety. Honestly, they all need locking up for child mistreatment. My father was annoyingly overprotective and would tell my mum to hold my hand in crowded places. Baby of the family and always treated like that and all, but I was 14 at the time. Thank God she never did anything of the sort. Now, whenever we cross busy or trafficky streets, he instinctively reaches out to hold my hand like he used to when I was a child, and we'd go on our regular mint choc chip or strawberry ice cream jaunts. He then proceeds to hold my hand in a vice-like grip. I'm 27. Yes, 27. One of my friend's cousins is to be walked up and down like a toddler whenever she ventures out alone. If they're out for dinner with family, my friend, who's 27, has to walk her cousin, 23 now, to the washroom. If she's going for a late-night film, the driver will buy a ticket and enter the theater too. This was back in India, though. When she goes to meet friends, read dates, somehow the driver just happens to follow her around. It's massively screwed up. She also has a maid of her own who's been employed only for her. Yes, only for her. Whenever she goes out of town for work purposes, I've seen my friend, who also has a maid of her own, and her cousins at their houses, telling the maid what to pack into her suitcase while they're lounging on the bed. No, they aren't royalty or nobility or aristocracy, they just love acting like they are. Christ, this is like a theoretical question for me. On the one hand, you get a free maid or butler, but they report everything you do to your crazy protective parents. Do you take it? I think for me, the answer lies in whether the servant is a reasonable person and accepts a weekly bribe in order to just tell your parents that you're a model citizen, while you go and smoke doobies and go to clubs. My high school always had senior trips, meaning each year the seniors would go to Florida or something. It was always very heavily chaperoned by at least a dozen teachers and parents. There was one family who never allowed any of their children to go because they had heard about the trip. All they'd ever say was, "Those senior trips will just get you in trouble." I mean, never mind that none of the kids had ever been in trouble before. A whole Facebook argument bandwagon about how parents don't let their teen children on their phones, which they check regularly. Let them have some privacy for frick's sake. A couple of years ago, I remember getting lunch at a sandwich place. I don't remember which one. And I ended up sitting next to a table full of mums who all had high school-aged kids. They didn't talk quietly, and their conversation was easy to overhear. Apparently, they met regularly to discuss what their kids, who were friends, were all getting up to. And the mums all used a particular phone app that let them read their children's text messages and emails. I felt so bad for those kids that had no privacy in their lives. From innocent to eerie. When did your kid make you think you were living in a horror movie? My then 3-year-old had a few gems in his time. He said, "I was so mad at you, I was going to destroy you." Yeah? How so, champ? "I was going to throw you in a volcano." Why didn't ya? "I don't know where a volcano is." "So, we're all good?" "For now, father." And then there was the other one. "Too bad the babysitter died." "No, she didn't, bud. She's just not here today." "Or she's in the freezer," he said while staring at the freezer. "You're pretty creepy sometimes, bud." My kid just smiled. My son tells me stories of scary Uncle Michael in his bedroom at night. He says he's a grey man that looks like his uncle, and he climbs on the walls and calls out to him, and one night, scary Uncle Michael tried to eat him. Yep, nightmare fuel. My mother died a few weeks ago. I went to her house to get some things, and she had a huge collection of stuffed animals that I brought home for the kids. My 5-year-old son and I were awake early about 3 days after her death, and he was playing with the stuffed animals in his room when he came out screaming and crying hysterically. This never happens. He's a very tough boy for 5. Now I was freaked, and I asked him what was wrong, and he was legitimately terrified. I'd never seen him like this before or after. He said that one of the stuffed animals had moved. He said he was playing with the other ones, and the little 2-inch beanie stuffed dog moved, turned its head, and looked at him. He said he threw a doll at it, and its face got real mean. He refused to go back into that room or leave my side until I put the stuffed dog in the trash. Not the inside trash or the outside trash near the house, but the dumpster outside of town. I don't believe in ghosts or anything, but carrying that thing out to the trash gave me goosebumps, and I felt super freaked out. Yeah, if horror movie logic is anything to go by, I'm sorry to inform you that your days are likely numbered. Your kid will probably survive into adulthood and make a cameo in the sequel as a haunted survivor, or turn into the monster himself, though. Good luck! My 3-year-old granddaughter said, "Grandma, I just saw a man with no eyes go upstairs." "Okay, kiddo, Grandma's gonna head the F out. Mummy and Daddy will be home tomorrow, and Grandma will never be back. Bye. Bye, 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 bye." It wasn't my kid, but I was working at my job as a liquor store clerk, and a parent came in with their kid. The kid started acting a little silly and asked if he could work here. I asked him if he was 18 and out of high school, and he played along for a little while and eventually confessed that he was merely 5. I told him, "Oh, that's okay, champ. Maybe I'll work with you in 13 years, and he looked me up and down and said, "No, you'll be dead by then." I'm not even 30 yet. What does he know? What does he know? The parent apologized, but it still rattled me just a little bit. My little sister had some creepy moments when we were younger. She often claimed that people were in her bathroom at night talking and watching her. She called them Poe and the Tape Monster. There are a couple of stories regarding them both funny and creepy. One night she woke up scared and went to my parents' room to sleep with them. Before she went back to sleep, she used their bathroom, and when she came out she said, "Why are people in your bathroom, Mommy?" Dad was out of town, and Mum still swears this was the scariest thing any of my siblings ever did. While I was driving my 4-year-old nephew around, he spent a solid few minutes telling me about the dead body he stashed in my trunk. This was a long time ago, and as far as I know, he isn't a serial killer. You've got to admit, right? You checked the trunk. Yep, the second we got to the mall. It's creepy and funny. My youngest once said to me, "I could make 3 baby hands out of your hand meat." My kid keeps talking about the babies on the walls of his bedroom. It's very off-putting. When our little one was 3, she had 2 imaginary friends who lived in the wall. Talk about a creepy thing for a kid to say. We moved and she's grown older. No talk of that kind of stuff anymore. "When I was your age," and then he tells this random story, and then he'll say, "My other mommy before you," and tells another random story. Is our kid reincarnated? My mum loves telling me this story about the time I discovered hypnotism. When I was 4, I found out about it. I don't remember how, but apparently I became fascinated by the idea of having mind control abilities. One day, my mum says my grandpa loaded me into the car after one of our normal grocery store outings, only for him to return an hour later furious. After he calmed down, he told my mum that I refused to stop staring him down in the rearview mirror with a very serious look on my face. He had asked me to stop on several occasions, but said I never really replied. I just kept staring menacingly. Then he said, all of a sudden, I looked into his eyes and said, "Papa, I'm gonna hypnotize you. I'm gonna put my toe in your mouth." My mum said she thought it was funny at the time, but she couldn't laugh because my grandfather was seriously so enraged. I ended up having my grandfather for 16 more years, and he was my best friend. I definitely thought it was more funny than creepy, but when my kid was 2, he was scribbling on a piece of paper and quietly sang, "Scrape, scrape, scrape your eyes today." This reminds me of my daughter. She sometimes sings, "The people on the bus go crunch, crunch, crunch," while she laughs. My 4-year-old kid was on the carpet playing with his cars. "I can't wait to get a new house when this house explodes." I was half listening. Sure, that sounds… Wait, what? "Yeah, when our house explodes, be ready and we'll just run out real fast." And then he turned back to playing with cars like nothing had been said. Thankfully, that was 5 years ago and my house has not exploded. Yet. Just after my little brother was born, my 3-year-old sister and I were talking about what not to do around the baby. Things like not leaving small toys out or throwing balls around him. After a few minutes, my sister chimed in and said, "You don't cut off lips with a sharp knife." My ex-father-in-law died a couple of years before my daughter was born, so she never met her grandpa. He was known as a pretty funny guy, always quick with a one-liner. As strange as it sounds, there were no pictures of him around until my daughter was about 4 years old, and my ex-mother-in-law set one next to the urn where his ashes were kept. The first time my daughter saw the picture, she pointed to it and said, "That's Grandpa. I like when he looks in my window and makes me laugh. I don't like his friends, though." She had never mentioned this. When I tried to ask her about it, she seemed nonchalant. She's older now and says she doesn't remember, but I'll never forget it. It was a Saturday morning a few years ago, and my wife and I were still in bed, and she was trying to convince me to make pancakes for breakfast. My oldest son, about 6 at the time, came into the room and agreed with her. He then said, "You should make some for Tyler, too." Now, he'd never had imaginary friends, and we didn't have anybody in the house or family named Tyler, so I was curious and asked who Tyler was. "Tyler's the man sleeping in my bed." So, turns out a local teenager had gotten real drunk the night before, jumped into the local public swimming pool, got separated from his friends and wandered into my house, thinking it was his friend's place. It was very suburban and all the houses were very similar. He passed out on my son's bed in his wet chlorinated clothes. My son thought this was fine and went downstairs to watch TV in the living room until he fell asleep on the couch, which was apparently the height of awesome for a 6-year-old. We called the cops. He was incredibly embarrassed, apologetic, and still quite drunk, and they came and took him home. Oh God! That is a horrifying wake-up call to your home security, isn't it? I never locked my door in my apartment block until one day I woke up to a drunk asleep on my couch. I don't know how they got in through the locked door to the block, though. I'll never know. Check and double-check the locks every night now. Your son seems super chill. My kid asked me, "How come you're not waking up tomorrow?" "Do you feel like burning?" asked my little girl neighbor. My son was about 3 at the time, kept refusing to go downstairs as that's where the Angel Man was, and Angel Man apparently wanted to hurt the family. We actually had a 6-foot-tall concrete angel in our basement for years. It was a family heirloom. It was painted, but the paint was all faded and peeling. I don't think a horror movie prop designer could have made something creepier if he tried. And our basement was an unfinished brick and rough concrete floor basement in a 104-year-old farmhouse. It leaked and was damp all the time. A little girl in my son's kindergarten class told me she lives across the street from a cemetery. I asked her if it was spooky to live that close to a graveyard, and she said very matter-of-factly, "Not during the day, but at night they all walk up to our windows and scream." I grew up across the street from a cemetery. My little sister told us when she was in kindergarten or 1st grade that she couldn't bathe by herself because the ghost comes and makes the water icy cold when nobody else was around. A year ago, my daughter was having night terrors. She was 4 at the time. She'd wake up screaming every night at around 3 a.m. My wife and I would go stay with her until she fell back asleep. We assumed she was just having nightmares, but one morning she told me that she was afraid because there was a man in her closet that doesn't have a head who keeps waking her up. I have this awesome video of my son Billy. He was maybe 2 or 3 at the time. He was taking a quarter and trying to put it in the slot just above the door handle of the closed closet. He kept repeating, "Billy, pay the lady. I pay her." When I asked what he was doing, he responded, "I have to pay the lady in the closet." I asked him why there was a lady in the closet, and he said, "She lives there. I pay her." When I was about 6 or 7, the house we were renting was going to be sold. My parents instructed us to keep our rooms tidy because people might be walking through the house during showings. I had the idea to take a little box and write "fortunes" on it. Inside were little slips of paper with "fortunes." The idea was that prospective buyers could take a slip of paper to get their fortune, kind of like a fortune cookie. I remember the first couple of slips of paper said stuff like, "You will have good luck." Then the rest of them had some pretty morbid stuff like, "You're going to die." My parents read the slips of paper beforehand, then sat me down and sternly told me the fortune box was a no-no. I was a pretty serious child. It didn't occur to me that a fortune box should be light-hearted. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. Don't forget to subscribe to Am I the Genius? My colleague has 2 sons, and the younger one started to have these terrible nightmares where he was being chased by someone with a huge knife and who wants to murder him and all the other kids. He would, as you can imagine, wake up screaming and refusing to go back to sleep. And then he asked his mum, "Mommy, is there a way I could just get it over with now? I don't want to have to do this anymore." I can't even imagine how his mum must feel when it's her child, but damn. I was talking to my son when he grabbed my face, got really close, and whispered, "Mummy, you're talking too loud. You'll wake up AmITheA." I whispered, "Who's AmITheA, buddy?" "AmITheA is my friend." "Where is AmITheA?" "In the mountain. He's sleeping." We lived near a large mountain range, by the way. Why do we have to be quiet for AmITheA? "He eats kids when they're too loud." Sometimes when we were too loud, my son would tell us all to be quiet and then run to the window to see if AmITheA was coming. For a while, I was afraid of looking up AmITheA online for fear that it would be some ancient demon or something. But my son kept bringing him up, so I finally got over myself and found out that AmITheA is a South African folktale about a giant who lives in a mountain who comes down to eat the village livestock. Afraid that he'll eat the villagers next, they find a way to stop him. They read the book to him at school. We observed a man littering in our block. My 3-year-old daughter said, He just littered." "Yes, he did. Littering is bad," I answered. "He should be executed," by which she meant specifically having his head cut off. I said, well, maybe not for a first offense." "Remember before when I was a baby, when I was a different little boy and I had a different mommy and daddy?" No, buddy. Do you remember that?" Only a little." My girlfriend's daughter used to talk about "before I knew you," meaning her mother. We asked what she meant by who she was before she knew us. "I was somebody else, but I can't remember my name." Once when I was putting up a new smoke detector, she asked me what it was. I explained that it would tell us or wake us up if there was a fire and we could get out of the house. "Oh, that's good. So I won't burn up again." And she happily skipped away. My daughter was 4, and while we were eating breakfast one morning, she said, "I was on a mountain once, and my dad died, and then I woke up and was in this house with you and Mama." Then we just sat there for a few seconds and looked at each other. Then she wanted to watch Paw Patrol. My son was talking about his friend, the upside-down clown, while I was putting him to bed one night. Needless to say, I am not a fan of that concept. Do you live in Derry, Maine, by any chance? No reason, just, curious about whether a certain cosmic being alternately played by Tim Curry or Bill Skarsgård was traipsing about again and making people float. My 5-year-old daughter is trying to process the knowledge that everyone dies, so she tends to casually drop stuff about me dying into normal conversation. I know this is her age-appropriate way of trying to process the concept of mortality, but it's so unbelievably ominous and it comes out of nowhere. "I like your dress, Mommy, but you won't be able to wear it when you're dead." "I love you, Mom, but I'll miss you so much when you're dead." She also once dropped an absolutely terrifying comment about snuggling me when I'm dead. By the way, I'm 28, which in her mind is unbelievably ancient. So to her, I'm practically at death's door. Playing on the floor with my son. He's 2. We put pillows on the floor, we're pretending to go night-night and sleep. He takes my pillow away from me, stands above my head, looks down and says, "Bye-bye," and places the pillow over my face. My son, when he's 3, told me he had a cloud sister with black eyes and teeth, but she was nice. That freaked me the heck out. While babysitting, the kid would tell me to turn the rocking chair around because she didn't want the person staring at her when she was sleeping. I'd do it, and the next day the rocking chair would be facing forward again. What I've been told I said to my parents when I was a kid. Apparently, I always used to insist that I was a little boy named Chris, even though I'm female and my name definitely isn't Chris. I insisted on this repeatedly as soon as I was able to speak, and I'd break down crying from frustration if I was told I wasn't. I also regularly told my parents that I missed my real family and that they'd died in a car accident, and I wanted to go to heaven to see them. Extra weird because my family isn't religious and we hadn't discussed any concept of heaven prior to this. It left my mum worrying that she had a kid with, well, some real worrying tendencies on more than one occasion. After a while, my parents convinced me to stop saying I was a boy named Chris and instead that I was pretending to be one. But that just resulted in me once telling my mum that I liked pretending to be Chris, but that I got scared when I did because there was always so much blood. My mum asked me if I meant ketchup, and I looked at her like she was an idiot and said, "No, Mum, it's blood," and then refused to talk about it again. This spanned from around when I first started speaking coherently through kindergarten or so. I've got no memory of it except that I remember really wishing I was a boy named Chris and feeling like something wasn't how it should be with me up until around 2nd or 3rd grade, and then it just sort of faded away. A kid I had as a patient many years ago. Right after high school, I got a job as an orderly at a rehabilitation hospital. I was 18 and about as green as grass. Most of the patients were paralyzed, some paraplegics, some quadriplegics, and some hemiplegics, which is like stroke victims. There were also some brain-damaged people there. One of the most seriously injured cases was a teenager who we'll call Joe, who had been in a motorcycle wreck and had not been wearing a helmet. He hit a curb and suffered a severe head injury. His family, especially his mother, were convinced Joe could communicate, but none of the staff believed them. He was racked with spasms and never looked at people, but he always looked around the room randomly. When he vocalized it, it just sounded like a bizarre moaning without any form or rhythm. It was the privately expressed view of all the staff members that he wasn't in there, like that he was too severely brain damaged to know what was going on around him. I thought other staff members were way too casual in the way they talked about Joe rather than to Joe when they were providing his care. Although he breathed on his own, he was on Unit 1, the unit with all the severely injured quads who were on respirators. His mother insisted on holding a bedside birthday party for him on the unit, complete with cake, party hats, and other stuff. We all thought it seemed like a bit of a cruel charade, but we were ordered to attend it, and we did so. We sang Happy Birthday, his mother fed him cake. He didn't seem to chew it, but he did still seem to swallow. It was sad and it made me a little angry that the family couldn't accept what was the obvious truth, that he was alive but not cognizant. I worked the 3 to 11 shift, and as an orderly, my main duty was turning the patients. Another strong young orderly and I went from unit to unit, turning patients from one side to the other to avoid bed sores. When we were leaving Unit 1, I thought I heard whispering coming from the direction of Joe's bed. I walked closer in the dimly lit room, and I could hear the very low strains of the Happy Birthday song. Joe was whistling, sort of tunefully hissing, very softly. From that moment on, I addressed Joe as Mr. Smith and was very careful to speak directly to him with respect. He still didn't seem to be in there, but I wasn't taking any chances. I think the macabre thought that he might be conscious and aware frightened people, and that's why they treated him as an object rather than as a person. When I was 16 and my younger brother was 9, he once said with a dead straight face, and I quote, "If I was to murder you in your sleep, no one would know or say it was me because I'm just a kid, and kids can't kill people." I had to sleep with one eye open after that. I think maybe I have to sleep with one eye open around all kids forever now. Sorry, future kiddos, there's a reason Daddy is just permanently tired and wary of you all the time, you freaky, murderous little jerks. Happened just this week after I had a small procedure at my doctor's office. My 2.5-year-old was doing a checkup on me with his little doctor's kit, and I made a joke asking if I was going to live, and he said, "No, Mom die." Oh, alright then. My ex-wife's nephew started talking about the monster that came to his room at night. He wasn't scared of the monster, but said she was a woman, knew his name, and said nice things to him. A couple of years after he started talking about her, he found an old picture album he'd never seen and was flipping through it on the floor. He flipped a page and jumped up, pointing at the album. "That's her. She's the monster." It was a picture of his Romanian great-grandmother who had died 30 years before he was born. I, as a 5-year-old child, told my parents I didn't sleep in my bed because of the old lady. Nearly every morning they'd find me asleep in my closet. They didn't think too much of it until other people would come stay with us and mention they saw an old lady standing over them when they woke up in the middle of the night. This happened to a good 3 visitors in that same room and bed, and all of them refused to step foot in that room again. My 5-year-old was speculating that the tooth fairy probably takes the teeth to put in her own mouth so that she has millions of teeth in there. Yikes. My eldest son, who was maybe 2.5 at the time, spent an entire morning saying in a sing-song voice, it's coming, ba-dump, dump, dump. I'll say it was funny for minutes 1 through 3, and then irritating minutes for 4 through 15. Ignoring him until minute 30, and then it just got creepier and creepier. I was playing Got Your Nose with my 2-year-old daughter, and the power went out. The whole house was pitch black. The kid then says to me, Uncle Alan, did you take my eyes? Travel nightmares. The destinations people avoided for the rest of their lives. Manila. I loved the other places I went to in the Philippines, but Manila was awful. The air quality, the traffic, the garbage, and the weird proliferation of air-conditioned shopping malls. Most of all, the child poverty was heart-wrenching. A good wake-up call for a privileged Westerner, but not one I want again. You know why they charge you $20 to leave the Manila airport? Because they don't know you'd pay $50. Pueblo, Colorado. It's perpetually a Tuesday in 1988 there. Every day. My best friend lives there and says it's probably one of the most boring places he's ever lived. He's from Oklahoma like I am, so that's saying something. United Arab Emirates. Why anyone ever decided to start a city where it's 120 degrees is beyond me. Very underwhelming experience in Dubai. It's just another Las Vegas, but nobody is having fun. Probably the Hollywood Boulevard bit in LA. It's not interesting and it's frickin' busy. I came here just to search the answers for my good old hometown of Gary, Indiana. Yep, every time. Hobbema, Alabama. This place had such a bad reputation they changed the name 2 years ago. It's obviously not fooling anyone, guys. Freeport, Bahamas. The beaches were very dirty and I just felt like I was in a shipyard. They've also got a problem with feral dogs. They were everywhere. It broke my heart to see the skin and bone dogs. I guess so many of them starve to death that they can't keep up with the body pickups. I saw too many decaying dogs to count. Seriously, I'd never go back. Although I didn't enjoy going to Freeport, it made me realize how nice I have it here in the US. Another reason I didn't care for my trip was due to the fact that I was out there vacationing, sipping on martinis, while the locals were struggling to put food on the table. I saw where they lived and it really broke my heart. I felt very guilty knowing that my tourist butt wasn't assisting them in any real way. I'm not familiar with Bahamian tax laws and government-issued programs, but I can't imagine that the tourist money goes back to the people if that makes sense. And I also really started upping my volunteer game, especially with the Humane Society after that trip. A holiday location so bad that it changes a person's outlook and makes them more of a philanthropist is a really damning indictment of how blatantly unashamed they are for how badly they treat their citizens. Good on you, author. Belize City. Belize was one of our stops for the cruise we were on. I always heard about how gorgeous Belize was, and I'm sure there are beautiful parts of Belize, but Belize City was an absolute crap hole. They pretty much dropped a majority of white US citizens off and thought it would be okay to let us roam a city that was being torn apart by the local civil war. The city was full of armed military guards standing at street corners, and the city canals and streets were incredibly polluted. I live in Baltimore and I've seen some bad neighborhoods, but Belize City seemed way worse than anything I've seen. Many stores had armed guards who'd unlock the door to let you in, and once you were inside, they'd lock the door behind you. We didn't experience any issues with the crime or violence, but it was the strangest feeling getting stared down from every angle. We stayed for about an hour and then decided it was time to get the F out. As we were leaving, there were 3 people standing near the port. They looked at us and said, "Welcome to the real world." Once we got back to the ship, we strolled past the lobby, and there may have been 4 or 5 employees working the customer service desk. Each of them had a deep line, and the chatter was all centered around angry complaints about dropping us off at Belize City. Needless to say, that same cruise line took Belize off their itinerary soon after. Somalia. I went there when I was in the Navy, and I spent some time on shore looking at pits full of corpses and kids with automatic weapons. Screw that place. Greyhound bus station in Atlanta. I've never seen such an array of terrifying things happen in one small space. That place is a nightmare. A quandary. Are Greyhound stations located in the ghetto of each city, or does their presence create one? Nobody's quite sure. It's like asking if chicken or the egg came first. My answer is actually the bus itself on my bus tour. It was the most frustrating travel experience of my life. Want to see something? Too bad, get back on the bus. Are you done seeing something? Too bad, wait on the bus. And here is the magnificent Yosemite National… Get the frick back on the bus, we're on a timetable, folks. My god, it was so infuriating. Frickin' Gary, Indiana. Came off the exit immediately into a neighborhood that just looked like it was hit with some natural disaster before and never recovered. But no, they're just too broke to fix their roads or anything. We tried to cut through the neighborhood as fast as possible, but the potholes made us not go over 25. We finally got to a gas station and the guy at the register said, "Yeah, you all should get out soon, it's about the time when they start robbing people." Got the F out of there. Lapa, Rio de Janeiro. Pickpocketers run that place. I saw one of my buddies get picked, and I confronted the pickpocketer in hopes of getting his stuff back. They proceeded to kick my butt. Just skip it. Brazilian here. The city is incredibly dangerous. If you want to avoid getting mugged, don't wear what you normally do. Basic t-shirt, old tennis shoes, and some jeans will do you fine. Don't ever confront a criminal there for your own safety. Just hand it all over. Oh, and when you're stopped in traffic, the windows should be going up. In Salvador, I got mugged by a kid with a knife pretending to wash windshields. Some other guy just walked right past us while he had the knife in my face and did nothing. I know Portuguese, so I asked the kid if he wanted dollars or reais. Threw him off. He said dollars. Little did he know that I only had $40, but way more in reais. Gave him the dollars and he was off. I don't imagine anyone has spent time in Port Moresby, Papua New Guinea. It has the dubious honor of being in the world's top 5 most dangerous cities. Plus, the murders that happen there are generally way more random than hellish substance-infused places like Honduras or Guatemala. Port Moresby is interesting as well, since there's a high probability that not only will you be killed mercilessly, but you'll be eaten as well. I spent a week there one time. Pattaya, Thailand. Basically the working girl tourism capital of Thailand. My aunt is Thai and took my friend and I there because we said we wanted to go to the beach. Once we arrived, we planned a trip to a nearby island because that beach was not what we had in mind. Ah, Dubai. It's Vegas without the debauchery. The hotter parts of Arizona. I swear that state's population is going to hit 0 if there's a large solar flare or an EMP. Baking dashboard cookies has become a popular pastime here. I've also seen people grill steaks on the asphalt. Send help, please. Zimbabwe. Went there to see Victoria Falls. Stayed at the Victoria Falls Hotel to be within walking distance. Everywhere, people were just standing around with just 2 or 3 carved trinkets they were trying to sell. There were absolutely no buyers. Looked like something out of the Twilight Zone show. First thing they asked you when you got close to them is if you would sell them your shoes. No kidding. Every single one. The shoes are actually more of a status symbol in some African countries than a Rolex or a Benz are to us. Your shoes as a rich first-world person, despite the fact that they're being used before, are worth quite a lot on a local market or can increase the social status of the new wearer. Now for you, they're used shoes. Trash, literally speaking, so he expects you to sell them for a good price or maybe even take pity on a poor soul and gift them to him. All in all, not the worst business model I know, and relying on first-worlders' pity appears to work. Dubai. I thought it would be fun to see all the skyscrapers and supercars. I got tired of it in 5 minutes. East St. Louis. I was meeting a colleague for dinner at a Mexican restaurant in a not terrible part of East St. Louis. Unfortunately, Apple Maps took me into a desolate neighborhood with gigantic potholes in the streets and empty parking lots, interspersed with abandoned houses on either side. Thankfully, it was a 90-degree Fahrenheit July afternoon and nobody was out and about. I stopped in the middle of one street, looked around, saw nobody, and entered the same address into Google Maps. This time, it actually took me to the restaurant. You almost got effed up. Never stop in ESL? What the hell were you thinking? This video is not sponsored by Apple Maps. That comment was written in 2017, and frankly, I'm appalled that even back then, anyone was using Apple Maps. I know we all hate how much we rely on Google, but frankly, don't we need reliable maps? More damning indictments of East St. Louis to follow. Had to drive through East St. Louis on a choir trip one time. Probably one of the most depressing places I've ever been. Boarded up, abandoned buildings everywhere, confused-looking people walking around, and the kicker was that almost every yard had these signs with, "We must stop killing each other" on the front and We must start loving each other on the back. A very sad place. Yakima, Washington. They might call it the Palm Springs of Washington or Yucky Vegas, but it's an absolute crap hole. Highest rate of carjacking in the country and rife with violent crime. I had a friend that went there for a soccer match when he was in high school, and the match was cancelled because one of the kids on the other team was a gang member and some idiots drove by and shot at the players on the field. Luckily, nobody was hurt, but it gives you an idea of what sort of special crap hole Yakima is. That said, the Yakima Valley makes some amazing fruit and hops. If you've ever had a Washington apple or a craft beer from anywhere in the US, there's a very high chance that the apple or the hops came from Yakima Valley. I was almost held hostage by a cab driver that gave us a tour of Mauritius. It was our last day, and the F word kept forcing us to go to these really weird places that were apparently exclusive. We made it plenty clear we had no interest in going to them, but he said he had to go as he got a kickback and he kept taking us. My girlfriend was just crying and crying. The airport of Moscow. Boy, that place was bad. The bathroom smelled like smoke everywhere, staff were unfriendly, and the gates changed all the time. Maybe it was just a bad day, but jeez, that place was unorganized. Definitely the United Arab Emirates, in particular Dubai. While flying home from a business trip about a year ago, I was pulled aside at security, forced to remove all my clothing, given a ridiculously intimate and degrading strip search, including bending and spreading and having to retract my weenie's skin, being forced to stand undressed while my belongings were searched and my tattoos were photographed, and then I was interrogated for over an hour while they looked through my phone, computer, and other belongings. I missed my flight and wasn't even given a reason for the search. Luckily, I haven't been back, and I never will be. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. Don't forget to subscribe to Am I the Genius? Apparently, Gary, Indiana is worth a video all by itself in terms of armpits to live in. I drove through it once and I was instantly depressed. Will hopefully never return. Weirton, West Virginia is the same way. I went there for work a few times. It was an old, mostly abandoned steel town. It was a happening place 30 plus years ago, and now it's all run down and grey and cloudy almost every day. I'd drive the 25 minutes to stay in Robinson in nearby Pittsburgh just so that I didn't have to stay there overnight again. Our department literally had rules regarding how long you were allowed to work at that plant before you had to come back or go somewhere else. We lost a couple of good engineers to that place. Daytona Beach. I'm not exactly sure why after a 9-month deployment I chose to go there. Never again. Syria. I hitchhiked from Alexandria to Istanbul, through Jordan and Syria before the Arab Spring. Syria was beautiful and a historically fascinating country, naturally fertile and prosperous, with delicious food and friendly people. But it was backward, close-minded, poor and seedy because of a corrupt, paranoid authoritarian government. Now it's a war zone and a humanitarian disaster, which is far, far worse. Well, I've currently been stuck in the Newark airport for 7 hours and I'd be perfectly happy if I never had to come here again. Update. Just landed. Total wait time to take off was 11 hours. They forced me to check my bag and then texted me that they lost it, and then it showed up again at the terminal after all. F New Jersey. F United. Thank you all for your support. Did I mention they sent me to Dulles instead of Reagan, so now I have to somehow get to the other side of Washington to get to my car? Ugh. Khajuraho, India. It's most famous for its intricately sculpted temples, some of which depict very intimate acts. I traveled through India alone for months, and as an obviously foreign woman, I got the very expected unwanted attention. But Khajuraho was different. It was non-stop everywhere I went, and the men always became aggressive when I ignored or politely declined their advances. I was having such a horrible time that I decided to just go back to the hotel, where a man in the lobby wanted to have dinner with me, and I again declined. The lady at the desk must have given him my room number, because he called my phone until I disconnected it, and then started pounding on my door and telling me to let him in. It was truly horrible. I've gotten many responses to this comment, so I wanted to clarify that I had a wonderful time traveling solo in India in general. I met tons of lovely people, and I built some friendships that still last 4 years later. I'm from a culture where machismo is prevalent, and I know how to stand my ground and ignore or yell back. I learned some Hindi and did this a few times when I deemed it necessary. I don't sweat the small stuff. I also dressed conservatively, usually a salwar kameez with long sleeves, and I traveled with people I met in guest houses if I was going too far off the beaten path. This one day in Khajuraho was just a higher level of intensity than I'd experienced before. I wouldn't, however, let this prevent me from traveling to India again, since I had a very positive experience overall. It's Dubai again. Long story short, I ended up unexpectedly spending 8 days there. Never been to a more vacuous, culture-deficient place. All it has is shopping and vast inequality and oppression of the poor. Oh, and it's hotter and sweatier than Satan's undercarriage. You know, unless I'm there to chase tornadoes, I never have another reason to ever go to Kansas again. It's just a paved cornfield and I had to drive the entire width of it. At least Iowa had wind turbines to look at. I'm from Kansas and you're correct. Flat and corn. Occasionally it'll be 45 degrees one day and 98 the next. Meteorologist's wet dream. Nightmare for the rest of us, though. There's one toilet in Cusco, Peru, that I totally defiled during a particularly nasty bout of food poisoning. Every time I started to clean up, the cramps returned and I had to put my bum back on the seat sharpish. It was like a hellish fusion of Sisyphus and the Augean stables, with added burning and shame. The horror. You know, I don't think we were meant to list such small, specific locales that we were personally responsible for the creation of, but you did make me laugh, so thank you for that. Marrakesh. This is a doozy, so get comfortable. I'd been twice with male friends, but the third time we went with a mixed crowd. We stayed together as a group through all of the holiday until the final day when the girls went out shopping in the markets on their own. We found them an hour later crying and shaking. One of the market sellers had been really aggressive with them, pulling them into his shop and physically holding them there until they bought something. Then he penned one girl against the wall, trying to get a kiss. He insisted it was part of his Berber tradition to try and kiss her, but eventually just settled to kiss her on the cheek while she was repulsed. And it gets worse. We reported this to the tourist police and they went absolutely nuts. They made us wait in the station while they found the market seller and dragged him out in front of us. The guy was crying buckets and collapsed on the floor in front of us. He begged us to forgive him, but the police stood behind us, grabbed our arms and said, "This is a very bad man. We need you to tell us you want to prosecute him. Don't waste our time." We were really intimidated by this, particularly as we don't speak French or Arabic, and the police were gripping onto us. We were genuinely scared they'd hold our passports and stop us going home. So then the police tell us this man is going to prison for 7 years for the crime, but we need to give a written statement. So we tell the full story to a man in an office and he writes it out in Arabic. We can't read this, but he tells us his translation, and it's completely wrong. According to the report, it was a serious attempted unspeakable act, and he pinned the girl down on the floor. We go back and forth trying to fix the statement for hours, but settling on the best we can do. They keep saying, the details aren't important. But those details were things like he forced me on the floor and put his hands all over my body, which didn't happen. They also took our passport details down. But wait, there's more. We now need to go to the main police station to report the crime, so they bundle us into a taxi, 6 people on the back seat, and we go to the main police station. It's an absolute crap hole. It looks like a massive derelict factory that was converted into a smack house. We get led to a room where the market seller is stood in a lineup with other men. He's still crying his eyes out and can barely stand, so the lineup is pretty pointless. There isn't any glass separating us. He's literally stood in front of us in the same room, which is really depressing for the girl that reported this. He's begging us to make this stop, but we're too scared to say something to the police. We have no idea where we are. The building is huge, trashed and empty, with like 5 policemen. The toilets were flooded and we didn't know where we were. Way out from the city center, and it was getting late. We eventually tell the police we were flying home tomorrow and they got real annoyed with us. They said we need to be at the courts tomorrow to stand in front of this man and accuse him of a crime in front of a public audience. But we can't because we'll be on a flight at that time. It now looks like things will work out. They say the man can't be prosecuted without the victim coming forward, which is a relief to us as we no longer want this. Remember, we're stuck in a strict foreign country, not speaking the language, and we're being pushed around by the police, whom are notoriously heavy-handed. They seem fed up at that point and drive us back to our hostel in a riot van. We fly home and we think it's all over. But wait, there's more. A month later, the doorbell rings. There's a Moroccan man stood there. He tells us Hassan is still in prison and he needs our help. The man has traveled miles across the country, he's here on a work visa, to ask us for help. Apparently, the market seller's lawyer gave the family our home address from the passport details so they could take us back to Marrakesh and tell the courts Hassan was innocent. We don't know if this is a scam or if the man is armed or anything, so we tell him to write us a letter and we'll respond only to that. A month passes and nothing more. Then the doorbell rings again, and this time there's a French woman stood there. She tells us she's flown over from southern France as a friend of the family to beg us for help. Apparently, she used to live in our city and she's staying with friends nearby. We arranged to meet in a cafe the next day. Turns out this is all true, really a very elaborate con. She shows us newspaper articles, the police report, and websites. We see a clipping from a whole page of the Marrakesh Times, which describes the event as an unspeakable act attempt. The lady tells us that the other market sellers paid the police to put Hassan away because he was taking their business. We don't know if this is true. We refuse to go back to Marrakesh and go in front of the courts because we still don't know for certain if this is a con or what might happen to us. We wrote a statement and got it signed by a local policeman as a witness. In our statement, we say he did grab at the girl but nothing else happened and that the man is innocent of what he's being accused of. The French woman says that she knows Hassan and he would never grab at a woman, but obviously that isn't true. So the French woman leaves with our note and says she'll stay in contact to let us know if he gets out okay. She never wrote back to us and we still don't know what happened and how much was true. We certainly won't be going back to Marrakesh and we're left with bad memories. I think you did about as close to the right thing as was possible to do in that awful situation. Impossible to tell if the guy really was the victim of jealous neighbors without going back and potentially finding out that you were being set up by some sort of revenge scheme or law enforcement trap. It's terrifying. I'd be scared that connected people knew where I lived. Qatar. Modern-day slavery is not something I want to support in any way. It's the same as Dubai in the sense of being void of any real culture. I go for work every few months and I never look forward to it. Scunthorpe. Because, well, Scunthorpe. Bali. I've done my time and never again. If I wanted to hang around obnoxiously drunk Aussies, I'd go to Australia. God damn it, you guys. I came here to get insight for my future travels, and all I've learned is not to go to Gary, Indiana, or that bathroom you exploded in Cusco. Pickering, Ontario. I can't even really describe why, but if you've been, you know. Who the frick travels to Pickering? They spilled the tea about me. The juiciest, meanest gossip I've heard about myself. At a family reunion, my mother stated, "Oh, she was so happy when I moved out. It was my house and I was letting her live there for free after her divorce." Well, if another nurse had been taking care of him, he'd be alive right now. I spent the entire night running around trying to stabilize a patient, and my witch of a coworker sat there talking smack with my other witch of a coworker loudly, talking about how incompetent I was the entire time. Neither of them lifted a finger to help. When the patient crashed, both of them just magically disappeared, and it was nurses from the other side of the hallway who had to come to help with the code. They came back after all was said and done, and then I overheard one of them say that. Then they proceeded to tell the unit manager that I was incompetent and crying at the bedside. Thankfully, neither of them work on the unit anymore. I was 7 and basically poor trailer trash, but I asked my friend if I could stay the night. He called his mum to ask, and I overheard her say, "Tell him no, I don't want roaches and lice." Really cut me deep. To this day, I have extreme anxiety about keeping my house clean. I couldn't help it if I was poor, and our roaches didn't pay rent, you witch. Overheard one of my aunts telling my mother that my arms and legs looked disgusting because of my body hair and she should do something about that. I was 11 and really self-conscious about being a hairy girl. When I was in the 7th grade, I lived in a crappy podunk town in East Texas. I was a weird and ugly duckling. In order to fit in, I decided to become a cheerleader, since all of them were popular and well-liked at my school. I made the team and considered all of them my friends, even though they were mean to literally everyone who they didn't consider cool. One day, during practice, the bases of my stunt, the people who hold you up, they just dropped me and I fell flat on my rear end, which bruised my tailbone really badly. At our first game, we were on the sidelines, and during a break I overheard our team captain laughing about how funny it was when her and the other base dropped me on purpose and that they'd hoped I'd be hurt enough to not be able to participate at the game. As a 13-year-old, it destroyed me, but in order to still seem like I was liked at school, I didn't tell anyone about it. I see this is going to be one of those sad videos, isn't it? Strap in, folks, I think we're going to be hearing from a lot of people who ended up having to move away to move up in life. Sorry that happened to you and your tailbone. Ouch. I saw 2 girls that I roomed with for a short while in college had been publicly posting on Facebook about how weird, annoying, and disrespectful I was. Their reasoning was that I was taking an 8:30 a.m. class and only weirdos do that, and that I made a crap ton of noise every morning and disrupted their sleep. It hurt because I tried really hard not to be disruptive. I wouldn't let my alarm go off, because I woke up naturally around that time it was scheduled, and I'd just turn it off before it beeped. This was partially out of anxiety. I changed clothes in the bathroom, tiptoed everywhere, and I wouldn't even eat or zip my backpack in my room because I wanted to be quiet. As far as I knew, neither of them woke up any of those mornings, and they never said anything to me about it. If people aren't willing to privately talk to you before they publicly talk about you, they aren't worth stressing over. I was copied into an email conversation where about 10 messages earlier, one of my employees had described me as an idiot and suggested to the recipients that they didn't get me involved in the situation they were discussing. I'd always thought we got on well, and it really knocked my confidence. Okay, update. Thank you for all your replies and messages. Some of you are really nice. I've got much thicker skin now, but this happened many years ago when I was quite new to management. I eventually talked with the lady who sent the email, and she was extremely embarrassed and apologetic. Then when we talked more about it, it came out that one of her colleagues was spreading crap about me, and she hadn't questioned what was being said. It took months to get rid of the real problem causer. This wasn't in the USA, so it's difficult to fire people where I am. The real confidence crusher was knowing that he was poisoning the well that whole time. Things were much better once he was gone. I didn't overhear this, I just read it in a file about me. My mother passed away suddenly, and I received a file from my father that she was meaning to give to me. It was a psychological profile, along with tests, personality tests, and other stuff. This wasn't a surprise to me since I'm autistic and I've been in therapy as a child. There was a part, however, about my family and their trouble with living with me. Especially my brothers and my dad were having problems coping, and learning how my existence pained them was difficult. My parents basically got divorced because of me. My brothers were embarrassed by me, and now I'm doing better than expected. I was never supposed to be living on my own. There was talk about assisted living or even an institution. But somehow I managed to leave home as soon as I got to 18. I got married, had kids, and even though I struggle a lot, I get by. I even have a good relationship with all my brothers, even though they still have trouble treating me as an adult. It's like always thinking everybody knows you're retarded except for you, and then finding out that it's true. My stepmom saying I was useless, heartless, making her miserable, leeching and stuff. All of this because I couldn't buy my dad a birthday gift and instead painted something for him. I was like 16 at the time and I had no money. I couldn't get my bio mom to buy something for her ex-husband, and the stepmom never wanted to get to know me. Actually pretty sad, as art was still a big deal to me at that age, and it's changed how I've seen her as a person. At my first internship, I overheard one of my supervisors ask the others if I was genuinely mentally handicapped. That hurt. Yes, she 100% meant what she said, but not in a compassionate way. She not only insulted me, but insulted the undergrad program I came from for sending her someone so, quote, incompetent. Nothing I did or didn't do justified her behavior. For example, she'd ask my opinion and then laugh in my face when I gave it. Or tell me a meeting was in one room when it was in another, and then snap at me for not being in the right place. That was 10 years ago. Now I have a few degrees and I'm happily employed in the same field at a company that actually values me. I phoned my friend and asked if he wanted to hang out. I was maybe 10. He said he had to ask his mum. I heard him say, "John wants to do something, but I don't want to see him." I guess he either thought he muted the phone or did a crappy job at muffling it or something. Then he came back to the phone. Sorry, Mum said I can't." He was a terrible friend over the years. I overheard, "He acts like people actually like him. Someone needs to tell him we only hang out because he'll do almost anything you tell him to. He's a sad little puppet." This came from a girl I had a thing for. Granted, anytime someone said something, they started things with like, "I wonder what would happen if," and $20 says you wouldn't or couldn't do, insert whatever stupid idea it was. I'd jump on it and do it, or at least attempt it. I'm probably blocking out my worst ones. I've learned it's pretty much human nature to talk trash about anyone who isn't present, so no reason to take it personally, but when you're a kid, it's a miserable experience. The worst case recently, I have a weird neurological problem in my shoulder and arm that no one has ever been able to diagnose. During an intense flare-up, I was referred to a physical therapist by a friend. The therapist saw me once and recommended surgery. I was very reluctant to take his advice, but I didn't say no. I called the surgeon she recommended. It turned out he wasn't accepting new cases. The second appointment, there was a scheduling error, and I arrived 30 minutes too early. I sat in the front office and listened to the therapist making small talk with another patient about how her next patient was a psycho trying to fabricate some kind of malpractice case and refusing to comply with her advice. The receptionist was sitting right in front of me, also listening, but she didn't run back to stop it, so it went on for quite a while. If I'd been a psycho trying to manufacture a legal case against her, she was kind enough to do all of the work for me. In the 8th grade, I had the highest GPA in my class, so I got to recite the Pledge of Allegiance at graduation. At our rehearsal, as I was walking up to the mic, I overheard a classmate whisper to his friend, out of the whole grade they had to pick the kid with the most annoying voice. It's a decade later and I still shrink into insecurity when I remember it. You know, the narrator often peruses the comment sections of these videos, trying to work out what he's doing that's working and what isn't. However, after running into the occasional comment that said something like, "God, he has an annoying voice," or "He sounds like a cancerous butt tumor learned to speak," immediately prior to recording a video and hurting my ego a bit, I've moved my comment research sessions to after I record. So basically I'm saying I feel your pain. Ha! Just 5 minutes ago. My coworker told me my other coworker told her she'd quit immediately if I got hired into the position they're currently at. Up until this point, I thought this girl and I were best friends. I even shared my Netflix password with her. That witch. I overheard my mom telling my aunt she hated me as a person. I was 13. My mom's hated me for years, and she has said it a lot. But when I left because I couldn't put up with her anymore, she wanted me to come back. For example, today, Christmas, she tried to lure me back by doing all the things I've wanted to do and by over-spoiling my siblings, and she was like, "Oh, I bet you got nothing from your poor father." She doesn't even know that Christmas is on a different date where I live now. I'm 14, by the way. I overheard someone saying they didn't want to work with me. I don't know why, considering I barely know them. It definitely hurt, though. My project lead said to my mutual friend, "I can't frickin' stand that guy." That one hurt me right in the feels and in my career. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. Don't forget to subscribe to Am I the Genius? I just moved into my dorm for my second year of college. My roommate was my best friend since 9th grade. My stuff hadn't arrived yet, and it was my time to register, so I asked him if I could use his computer. I sat down and he had AIM open to a conversation with another friend of ours. I didn't scroll up, but from what was just visible on screen, they were talking about how weird I was and how awful it would be rooming with me. I closed it so that he wouldn't realize I'd seen it, I registered, and I left. We still lived together that year, but we didn't hang out at all. We just kind of cohabited. I never asked him to hang out as friends, and he never asked me. Move-out day that year was the last time we spoke. That was over 10 years ago. We chatted every day for 6 years, and then haven't spoken since. I still don't know if I did or said something to flip how he felt about me, or if he never really liked me to begin with. The possibility of the latter really messes up your future friendships. Heck, the former does too, knowing apparently you're capable of unknowingly saying or doing something to just throw away a 5-year friendship. Everyone I'd invited to my first ever sleepover, laughing while reading my diary entries about how awfully my dad had treated my family. I'd left the room and one of my friends had gone snooping. It was worse when they wouldn't stop or give it back when I burst in and pleaded with them, and then everyone laughed even harder. That was the first and last time I wrote anything real like that in a diary. I think this was the 9th grade. A girl I had a crush on but hadn't really talked to at all was moving away. A few days before she moved, I overheard her saying, "Yeah, I'll pretty much miss everyone, but I'll tell you one person I won't miss. Jonathan." That kinda sucked. My dad's friend telling my dad that I, his 16-year-old daughter, was not that good looking. Asked him if he'd saved up money to cover for that dowry, money exchanged by parents to the groom at the time of marriage. Since that day, nobody could convince me otherwise. Heard my mum complain about the Christmas gift I gave her a few years back. Seems small, but I don't know, it just sort of hurt. While not a mean comment, this one killed me. I have epilepsy, and I overheard my parents and neurologist talking about some of the effects if my seizures continued, which were basically becoming dependent for everything, short and long-term severe memory loss, and my IQ dropping a lot. It really hurt hearing that in a few years I'd have gone from honors classes to special ed. Thankfully, my seizures have stopped, and the only lasting side effect is some memory loss. But man, that sent me spiraling for a long time. My dad saying he expected my twin sister to do great things. That's not so bad, until he followed it up with, "I don't know what I'll do about Sheila though." He still doesn't know I heard that, and I plan to keep it that way. Heard two of my friends at the time planning to go out later, making sure to, quote, ditch the redhead. Me. They'd been my only friends since I could remember. Then there was the time I let my mum know I was dating a girl she knew and really approved of. I heard my mum talking on the phone immediately to a friend of hers that she was disappointed in the girl's choice and that she hoped she'd try dating other people. I also heard a group of people I was out with talking about me in a pretty bad way, and my best friend at the time joining in. All of that was over a decade ago now. In college, I really focused on getting better socially, and I went to a faraway college where I could get a fresh start where I didn't know a single person. Made a great career for myself and moved to a town in a different state with a beautiful girl who I didn't tell my family about until we were engaged. And now I run a very successful business, and I'm pretty well liked from what I can tell. Coming home for Christmas, though, it's like I'm frickin' back in high school again. The way I'm treated here by even my own family is super toxic. It's no wonder I was so socially awkward as a kid. My mother telling a relative that I was useless, selfish, arrogant, ornery, and stupid for giving up on my education. I was 16. I just transferred from a private college prep school 7 miles away so I could go to public school 1 mile away. For both, I walked and took public buses. I was my mum's caregiver, housekeeper, bill payer, shopper, gardener, handyman, security service, and courier service 24/7. I had no social life. And I worked part-time. I'd been doing this alone for 3 years, though I was the youngest of 7 siblings. I was floored. I felt like I'd been sucker-punched. I stood there in my apron and rubber gloves, holding a laundry basket, and bawled my eyes out. It wasn't as much the content, which was bad, but the context. She was lying and doing it to ensure that I looked bad enough to everyone that if I reached out for help, none would be forthcoming. I learned a hard life lesson that day. I overheard my dad tell my mum that I'm not capable enough to go through with my higher studies. One of the worst feelings when your parents don't have any faith in you. I've now graduated from a prestigious school and I have 2 degrees to my name. This is quite a collection of stories. I've never wanted to punch so many people I don't even know right in the frickin' face. Hey frickin' men. Good lord, I think there's a very good reason that a number of these people are gone from or now only tangentially involved in the authors' lives. I've always said that if you have people constantly betraying you, you should at least take a quick look inwards. But now I think about it, on the flip side of that, if everything seems good and then you find out one specific person or group is just talking pure poison behind your back, there's a lot less room for doubt that you might be in the wrong. These people suck. I was sick, septic, dying in the ER at my local hospital. I had tubes coming in and out of me. I had IV antibiotics. I didn't know if I was going to make it through the night. My family was at my house, and my niece, who was with me, called the house and put them on speaker. I heard my mother telling them how she didn't care about me, never had. She was only there to make sure my nephew was okay, that I got dirty diseases from being gay and sleeping with everyone in town. No, it wasn't a transmitted disease. No, I didn't get it from sleeping around, and I haven't bothered with her since. Not overheard, but accidentally saw messages popping up on my mother-in-law's iPad as she was texting her friend from another room about how I used to be attractive, but that now I was fat, and that her son was basically a saint for still being with me. It broke my heart. I went to school with a black eye and busted nose from my dear old dad. Child Services was called to do a home check on me. My dad and mum told the worker I'd done it to myself, and I was ill and that I'd written in my diary that I wanted to hurt my family. I didn't even have a diary, and of all the people I was close to, my little brother was number 1. It got me a blacker eye and an involuntary stay in a locked ward. I bailed ASAP. My father said he was too busy to come to see us on Christmas. I told him my 2-year-old had picked out presents for him. I was also going to announce my second pregnancy. I was at my brother's house when my father called to offer my brother a ride to the airport Christmas morning. The airport is less than 5 minutes from our house. My best friend's story, not mine, but I figured it's worth sharing. We'll call her Kerry. She was born super prematurely, but she ended up completely fine. Like you'd never know unless you saw the pictures of when she was born. Anyways, when she was around 8, she was at the top of the stairs, head peeking through the banister, secretly listening to her parents argue downstairs about how her dad was too hard on her brother for his grades. Her mum says, "Well, why aren't you that hard on Kerry? She doesn't get straight A's either." And her dad responds, "Kerry was born prematurely. She's probably an idiot." Honestly, Drew is like a 2 out of 10. Oof, thanks for that. Hey, on the bright side, they could have said 1 out of 10. On the dark side, they actively compared him to all the ugly people, ranked them, and honestly gave him the second lowest score. Wouldn't you prefer to just come first? When I was in middle school art class, something funny happened and I let out a loud laugh. I then overheard one of my childhood best friends whisper to another person, "God, I hate Tucker's laugh." I immediately looked at him and said, "What?" And he just looked down at the table like he didn't hear me. This actually made me change my laugh. It's completely different now from what it used to be. I went to school for a year for baking and pastry arts. There was a program-wide competition and I was one of the only people in our section that wanted to compete. During an exam, I was waiting for some sugar to boil, so I was standing by the front room at the burner, and the other chef in charge of the competition comes in to talk to our chef. They were whispering to each other for a few seconds, and then I clearly hear our chef say, "Well, it's not that she's bad." He shoulder checks and sees that I'm staring right at him, and they awkwardly step out of the room. Looking back at it now, they were probably just surprised that I wanted to compete, since I'm definitely not the most outgoing person in the universe, but at the time I was devastated. Given all the really heavy stuff going on in some of your stories, I'm actually really lucky and I'm aware that this is a very silly incident. Went out to a bar with some friends for a birthday party for my ex-girlfriend. She really messed me up when she left me, like real bad, but I was trying to be nice since she went to the trouble of inviting me, so I figured I'd go out and be there for a drink or two. So a mutual friend who had been broken up with a few days before was there as well. And so as I made the rounds, I talked to her and tried to do whatever I could to let her know it would be okay. I'm no therapist, but I did my best, you know? I knew what a bad breakup was like, as I was also going through one, so I tried to help. Anyways, after I left the table, I overheard her talking to my ex at the bar about me trying to give her advice, and she said, "Well, nobody's ever loved him, so what does he know of any of this?" And they started laughing. I don't think they know I heard, but I grabbed my coat immediately and took a long walk home. I don't need people like that in my life. I haven't willingly seen either of them since. My fiance's mother trying to convince her to break up with me because I was, quote, a lazy slob, as I was still recovering from injuries I sustained in Afghanistan that limited how active I could be. My recovery went well and I'm much better now, both physically and mentally, and while her mother is still pretty cold in general, it doesn't bother me any. Pawn shop fails. The wildest get-rich-quick schemes we've seen. I'm a pawnbroker. Somebody bought in their dead grandmother's gold tooth, plucked from her ashes, with the tooth still in it. We told her that the tooth had to be separated from the gold for us to weigh it. They desecrated their loved one's remains for less than $2. Comic book shop employee. Let me tell you, every single seller has a, quote, totally mint collection, and a first appearance of Superman or Batman. There have been literally hundreds of Batman or Superman #1s printed over the years. Every time they reboot a series, it starts with issue #1. The people who were polite about it, I didn't mind. The people who thought we were trying to rip them off and that their books were priceless just did my head in. This is especially dumb considering that Batman and Superman's actual first appearances were in comics that didn't even have Batman or Superman in the title. If it was the Hulk, at least his first comic actually was The Incredible Hulk #1. A guy literally brought in an RPG. He was doing yard work for this old lady whose husband had passed. She gave it to him for doing some yard work, not realizing it was live and active. The guy was career military, and after the bomb squad came and disabled it, they went to their house and found a trove of similarly very illegal military-grade weapons. Oh, you mean that kind of RPG? What's funny is that this sounds exactly like a role-playing game quest. You did some lawn work, probably killed some low-level mobs. All for an old lady. Thank you, adventurer. Here's a fully functional weapon I have lying around. A kid from my school had a letter signed by Abraham Lincoln. He brought it to show and tell one day and we were all super impressed. In grade 12, he stole it from his dad and went to pawn it. He bragged about how he was going to be rich. It turned out his grandfather forged the letter and gave it to his dad as a gift. I had a guy try to get $100 for 2 wheat pennies and 2 buffalo nickels, 4-legged. About 14 years ago, I had a guy call the store and ask if we took GPSs. I told him we did, and then he asked the address to the store, and I told him. Then he asked me how to get there. Haha, well, in 2011, that certainly wouldn't be a ringing endorsement of the main way people got around. I was about to ask why you'd even bother stocking GPSs, but then I remembered that thin stretch of time where most people I knew had a TomTom or some such device, before we worked out that we had a machine in our pockets that could do the same thing without buying additional hardware. What did you want him to do? Take the GPS out of its original packaging and slash its value by over 90%? No GPS collector would be that foolish. Had a guy try selling me a firearm. Before I could even nope him out of there, the shop was in New Jersey, we don't buy those, he began to point the weapon around him with people all over the store pulling the trigger. That guy was a special kind of guy. Fortunately, it wasn't loaded, but still. I don't work in a pawn shop, but I bought my first guitar in one. The big defense contractor in my town laid off over 10,000 people overnight, and the contagion spread. I was looking for my first guitar, and I'm cheap. After checking the music stores, I hit up the pawn shops near work. While I was looking, this clean-cut guy in his early 30s comes in trying to pawn his guitar, hard case, and effects. Since the shop had a bunch, they offered him crap, evidently, and he left. He was almost crying, saying he got laid off and had to pay some bills. I followed him out and asked him what he wanted for it. He said $100. I also gave him my phone number and said he could buy it back when he got on his feet. I never heard from him. I'm looking at it now. Unplayed for months. I hope everything worked out for him. I worked in a pawn shop for around 7 years or so. We had people trying to pawn fake jewelry all the time. The best was when they didn't know it was fake. So many women left yelling about that cheap son of a bee. I can't even remember half the stupid crap we turned away. There was one thing that we didn't turn away, and we should have though, and I love that story. You see, one of the other employees took in what he described as a 24-karat gold baby bracelet. It was a ring for a gentleman's downstairs. A golden rooster ring, if you will. This employee was a bit of a know-it-all, and he liked to rub other people's mistakes in their faces. He eventually went on to become manager, and then district manager, and you can bet your sweet keister I made sure every employee under him knew about the baby bracelet. He never lived that down. Not a pawn shop, but GameStop. Guy rolled in with hundreds of bootleg games and a bunch of modded consoles. He couldn't fathom why I wouldn't take them. I used to work at one, and back when they took DVDs, that was a constant issue. People trying to sell us DVDs they burned off their computer and getting mad when we wouldn't take them. A penny that was dated 2009. You gotta offer them $5 on store credit and sell them something for $25 that they wouldn't have bought anyways, and then you still made $10. We had a smackhead try to sell us a quarter. He wanted $60 for it, with 2001 on it. His logic was because of September 11th, it made the quarter a whole lot more valuable. I worked in a jewelry store during the peak of the everybody buy gold and diamonds phase. A group of kids comes in with a ring that they found in the parking lot. It's an obvious cubic zirconium, which I tell the ringleader. As soon as he hands it to me, one of the others demands, a touch annoyed, "How do you know?" In one of those excellent, too rare moments of perfect reaction, I asked, "Why did you bring it to me?" "Because you're a jeweler." Oh. Now it's my time to shine. I'm a store manager at one of the busiest pawn shops in Northern California. And because of that, I have the high volume of customers that most don't. So that means a lot of stories. One guy bought in a stone painted green, claiming it was ancient gold, and that after aeons it had developed a patina. I tried to explain to him that all gold is ancient gold made in something as intense as a dead star colliding, but he insisted it was gold. After about 30 minutes of discussion, he forced me to test it, and when I showed him it wasn't gold, he told me he spent $4,000 buying it off some guy. Another guy bought in a bag of used syringes and wanted to trade it for a TV. I did not oblige. Another bought in a piece of safety glass from a windshield and claimed it was a diamond even when I assured him it wasn't. Someone else bought in a clump of bent and slightly melted forks and spoons, claiming it was a meteorite fallen from the ISS trash that was shot into space. Then someone else bought in a costume cape, claiming it was the real invisibility cloak from Harry Potter. With further questioning, he didn't think it was a prop from the movie, but the actual magical cape. As a watch guy, this is my favorite one. Someone bought in a, quote, Rolex, claiming her father gave it to them. When I showed her that it actually said Rolflex and Skiss Made, she claimed that those were misprints and that meant it was worth more because of it. After I opened the watch to show her the movement, I saw that there was no movement at all, but just a weight in the back. A couple came in with an old 1990 30-inch TV claiming that it was an antique, and they refused to leave the store until we gave them $800 for it. We showed them selling online for literally a couple of dollars, but they refused and said they knew what they had. Not in line with the crazy people, but a good story. A couple used to come in once a week and pawn stuff. Well, apparently one day the wife decided she was done with him as a husband, snuck up behind him in the store, sprayed him in the face with pepper spray, stole his car keys and his wallet and ran out of there and stole his car. Then there was the time someone came in with an obviously recently used dialysis machine. It still had blood sprayed on it like they ripped it away while it was in use, I don't know, and they tried to sell it for thousands of dollars. You know, we passed on that one. A surprisingly low amount of stuff we take in is stolen, but there was the one time one of my coworkers took in an Audemars Piguet watch and asked the guy how much he wanted to sell it for, to which he responded that he wanted at least $100, so my coworker just gave him $300. The police report was filed and nothing came back stolen, so I don't know what was up with that. I mean, pretty much anything. People came in all the time thinking they could sell or pawn something for almost as much as they bought it new. Our policy was generally to buy it for 25% of the new price, and only higher if it was an interesting or high-value item. I always hated jewelry, because you just knew the person was going to get furious at your, quote, lowball offer. I paid $10K for this at the jeweler's, and here's the receipt and insurance certificate. Unfortunately, we go by the weight of gold, which has a fluctuating market price, and the size and quality of the diamond. Going by our rates, I can't offer more than $200, and I can't blame them for feeling insulted. It sucks because while some people pawn stuff to feed their substance habit, which sucks for them too, you know, many of them do it because their power is going to be shut off, or they can't afford food for their kids, or because their husband's medical bills are slowly creeping up and, hell, I haven't worn this ring for years. Who cares if my grandmother gave it to me? It's gotta be worth thousands. Or the 100 other reasons poverty frickin' blows. But as the employee, you have to sit there and be stubborn because you're poor too and your frickin' dirtbag boss will deduct anything overpaid from your check. Pawn shops give you cool stories, but it does gradually crush your soul. Yeah, I guess you have to be prepared for some tantrums. I'd think people who are desperate enough could be pretty violent too and maybe break stuff. Jobs set up to exploit people down on their luck have got to be hard for a good person to work in. I took an old $10 bill into a dealer to see how much it was worth. I don't recall the year, but it was pretty old. I figured it might be worth something. The guy says, $10. Showed me what a bill would have to be like, and I asked how often he sees them. He gave me a longish answer about collectors and how they're not uncommon, but you don't see them since people hold on to them. After that, we just started to talk, so he showed me around. Nobody else was in the store, so he had the time. People also like to talk about their passions, so he was in his element and I got a bit of a history lesson. I spent 30 minutes in his store with him looking at rare money. That was cool of him not to just brush you off since you weren't trying to waste his time and not many knew a lot about it. Especially since actually valuable old money is in a totally different league than regular old money. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. Don't forget to subscribe to Am I the Genius? I might be late to this, but I worked at a pawn shop for about 6 years. I once had a customer walk up to the counter and slide a gold coin to me and say, "I think this is gold, man." This particular customer reeked of bile and looked like he was just strung out on everything possible. I looked at the coin and slid it back to him and replied, "This is a Chuck E. Cheese token. I can tell by the mouse on it." He just said, "Oh," and walked away. That was when I noticed he had crapped his pants to the point it was almost all the way down his pant leg. There was a buy and sell by my house that would give you $5 for any game and sell every game for $10. I used to go in and check the prices on all the games, and if I'd make more than 10 from GameStop, I'd buy the game, go to GameStop and sell it, and then buy all the crappy games GameStop had that were less than $5, and take them back to the buy and sell to make more money. You see, I was a smack addict at the time, so that was my job when I wasn't working at my restaurant. Worked at a traditional games store. I had plenty of sketchy white trash people coming in with their kids' old Yu-Gi-Oh! And Magic cards, thinking they were extremely valuable. Usually it was just a mismatched starter set from the early 2000s or the like. I'm not sure what started the idea that old trading cards were going to be ridiculously valuable, but no, I won't give you crystal money for your dark magician. The level of disappointment and oftentimes outright anger on their part was difficult to deal with. I began just telling trashy-looking people who weren't store regulars that we didn't purchase cards. I did once have a guy bring in a collection that had a gnarly-looking Black Lotus. I gave him a good deal for it. My dad had a real messed up woman come in and try to pawn her smack. For what? To buy more smack? As a worker in the ghetto, I get grills and gold teeth almost daily, straight from the mouth, and then they get mad when I can't accept them and they throw a fit. Every employee wears panic buttons to call the cops immediately if something happens as well. "I'll take signs you should get a job elsewhere for $300, Alex." I do some work on the administrative side for a pawn shop. Insofar as my shop, it's quite profitable. Also, bulletproof glass. Also, armed security guards. A good friend of mine owns a pawn shop in Florida. He once bought a collectible book of state quarters for less than the face value of the coins. The customer wasn't bright enough to pop the quarters out of the book and spend them. My buddy's ability to keep straight face in those situations and make the customer feel like he was getting a deal provides me endless entertainment. A month ago, a man stole a lawnmower from the front of our store. Well, just 2 days ago, he returned to the shop with the exact same lawnmower, claiming it was his. He tried to sell it to us. Not only did the serial number on that mower match the one we had, but it still had our price tag on the handle. Worked at a comic book and memorabilia store, and people have really messed up notions of value, I can tell you. Just because it's old, it doesn't mean it's valuable. Just because it's rare, doesn't mean there's a market for it. The worst was when people would come in with things that were signed with no authentication and demand outrageous prices. Some old lady and her obviously tweaker granddaughter bought in a comic they claimed was signed by Stan Lee and wanted $1,000 for it. We laughed them out of the shop. Also, a picture of you with William Shatner that he signed has no value to anybody but you. I used to work in a pawn shop in LA. One time this guy bought in 100 $2 bills, non-consecutive, and he wanted a loan of $120. My boss told me to do the loan, so I followed the instructions and gave the guy $120. The guy then managed not to come back for the bills, so he made an $80 profit from sheer stupidity. I was a Babbage's worker in the early 2000s. That's basically like UK GameStop. This was a case of a company being dumb. GameStop either owned or acquired Funkoland and a couple of other GameStop brands at the time, Babbage's being amongst them. We had a local guy that would drive about an hour each way and buy out every single copy of certain NES games and then bring them to our store. It'd do the same in reverse as well. The company would then dutifully redistribute the games to equalize inventory between the stores. All told, he made close to $50K before they figured it out and disallowed transactions of 10 games or more in one visit. Last I heard, this same guy was churning manufactured spending on gift cards, credit cards and stuff to the tune of $60 to $70K a year. That guy knows how to hustle. I'm not a pawn shop worker, but this is still kind of a cool story, at least I think. Either way, both the shop owner and I were happy with the events that went down. I used to frequent yard sales, buy vintage items, and then take them to the antique shop and make a little money on the side. One day I found this little glass figurine at a yard sale for 25 cents. When I flipped the item over and saw the red Occupied Japan logo, I got extremely excited and bought it on the spot. I took it over to the shop and sold it for $45. The shop owner wouldn't go any higher, but hey, I made $44.75 off a quick purchase, so I wasn't too worried. The figure was actually worth about $125. Either way, I made money and that figure is still sitting in his shop for sale at $125. People bring in dumb crap all the time to get a few bucks for their substance habits. It starts from a candies box stolen from the shop next to the pawn shop, to plungers, rubber ducks, electronics, real and fake jewelry that they thought was real, and ending on cars. Again, exploitative and nasty business depending on what area you live in, but one certainly seems to accrue some interesting stories doing it. I worked in a pawn shop in the Midwest for a year and a half. We had a very large woman bring in this bizarre-looking machine. She sets it on the counter and says, "I want $500 for it." We're just staring at the machine and then looking at her, and finally the pawnbroker goes, what is it?" "It's a homemade breast pump." Yeah, this woman made her own breast pump and thought she'd get $500 for it. So weird and gross. So many people try to bring in their tattoo equipment. I don't know if other pawn shops take stuff like this, but in my area, it's a hard pass due to bodily fluids. Gross. And some of these people get so angry when you tell them no, screaming about how they spent $6,000 on this and how can we not take it. We had this guy who'd dig through the garbage cans and try to bring us stuff to sell. Not uncommon, but it was very obvious that this stuff was coming straight from the dumpster, and he dug it out like 10 minutes before he walked into the store. One time we had to kick him out because he was losing his mind over the fact that we wouldn't give him $15 for a desk lamp that had a broken, bendy neck. And this was despite the fact the pawnbroker pulled up the exact lamp on Target's website selling for $10, not broken. This guy just didn't get it and was calling us B-words and C-words over it. One of my favorites is the lady who called asking if we take books. We told her we'll consider collector item books, but before we could explain, she got all excited and hung up, saying that's exactly what she had. Now, when I say collector's items, I mean like first editions or one of those special edition movie books or whatever. This lady proceeds to come and ask for help carrying in her 10, yes, that's right, 10 totes of, in her mind, collector books. These collector books? 10% romance novels that you can buy in bulk from any thrift store. The conversation was the following. The pawnbroker said, "Ma'am, these aren't collector's items. We can't give you anything for them." What do you mean? They're collector's items. They're all from the same publisher and everything. Yeah, that's not what makes them collector's items. I'm sorry, we can't take these. You could consider donating them to a thrift store. Are you kidding me? Do you know how many years I've spent cherishing these? These are collector's items. I am a collector and I collected these. I'm sorry, ma'am. I will not be leaving this store until I get at least $300 for my collection. We ended up having to call the cops because she sat in the parking lot for 5 hours ranting and raving about how we're a scam. The last straw for my boss was when she opened the door and screamed at the top of her lungs like a 5-year-old and then slammed the door again. As a side note, my manager was the manager of said pawn shop and that's how we met. He loves to tell people that he got his wife at the same place he got his nice watch and TV. What an idiot. We combat a lot of people coming in with stupidly high asking prices by keeping an equivalent item in stock at a reasonable price. For example, the 1780 Austria silver thaler, which has Maria Theresa on it, if original, goes for a lot of money, but almost all of them are reproductions. The original dies were never destroyed and were used to make the reproductions, therefore they look exactly like the originals. One day we had a father and son come in so excited they'd finally hit the jackpot. They showed me their Austria thaler. I offered them a little bit shy of the silver content, which was $20 at the time, and the dad got real angry. He claimed we were trying to rip him off. That's understandable, I thought, because it's almost identical to the expensive version. So I tried to explain to him that there's hundreds of thousands of reproductions, and he still didn't get it. His son did. So now his son and I tried to get him to come around, and he wouldn't. That's when I went to the back room and pulled out a bucket with about 15 of the same kind of thaler that he bought in, and I told him that if he thought they were worth thousands of dollars, I'd sell him mine for $22 each. He never even flinched and said, "I'm not here to buy these, I'm here to sell mine." At that point, I just said, "We aren't buying those thalers anymore. Have a nice day." It's kind of the opposite, but in the mid-80s I worked for a guy that ran food trailers that went to different festivals and stuff. It was a blast of a summer job. But anyways, kids would dig around the house to find money to blow at the arcades and for food and rides and stuff. Many of these kids would get into the coin collection, seeing 10 or 20 but not realizing they were silver certificates, silver quarters daily, Indian head pennies. We even had a guy pay for his drink with a roll of buffalo nickels. Musical instruments. I'm sorry, but your student flute from 1970 is tarnished and dented. Not to mention the cost of replacing the pad and corks would be more than buying a brand new student flute. Keep it for the memories. They're worth more than your crappy flute. 10 years in experience running a pawn shop. Fake Rolex watches, family heirlooms, parking lot buys that turned out to be fake, they were all the norm. The weirdest thing I've loaned on would be dentures. I'd give the guy 10 to 20. I was asked why I took them, and my response was always the same. If that motherfricker wants to eat solid food again, he'll come get them. He always came, and I redeemed them. From outrageous to illegal? The wild world of parent demands. I'm a camp counselor at an overnight camp. One kid's mum called to tell us that her kid can't drink water or take a shower because he was going to have a mental breakdown from all the minerals in the contaminated water. She said he could only be exposed to pure water, whatever that means. Long story short, she tried to sue us for unsanitary water conditions. Lady, your kid's going to have a mental breakdown from the dehydration from the lack of water, whether purified or not. I worked at a camp and a parent came to me explaining how her child would need help going to the bathroom, specifically wiping as they're not potty trained. The child was 7. He wasn't special needs or anything like that. His mother just always did it for him. We refunded money to the parent and explained that being potty trained was one of the conditions for the camp. My husband's nephew is this way. I hate it. His mother is a horrible person and he's a nightmare child. He just does whatever he wants and screams and curses in your face whenever you try to get him to stop. He'll scream things like, "I'll punch you in the ding-dong," or "I'll frickin' kill you," and nothing anyone does will make him behave. He's not properly potty trained and he's like 6 or 7, I don't know. I actively avoid him because he's such a little crap bag. He'll just sit on the toilet screaming, "I'm done," until someone comes and wipes for him. It's horrible and disgusting and I don't know how he handles school. Used to work at the mall. The amount of people who'd ask us to watch their kids while they finished shopping was astounding. The worst, though, was the woman who just left her 5-year-old daughter at the store because we had a kids' table and she told her to sit there and play. It was a stupid busy day, so we didn't notice at first, but then when it slowed, we realized we had an abandoned kid on our hands. The manager was on the phone with security when the mom came back, grabbed the kid, and effed off without a word. Our library children's staff regularly found young children abandoned in their department. About once a month, someone dumps their kid at the library and doesn't show up before closing. One of the staff waits with the kid for a while, but eventually we have to call the cops. It's amazing how many of them are crappy about it too. We don't get paid overtime, folks. We had parents a few weeks ago that told the principal of the school that they were keeping their child home the entire week of Substance Awareness Week, because it shouldn't be the school's responsibility to explain substances to kids. These parents wanted to educate the child on the matter themselves. Both of them were lacking about half their teeth, and the other teeth were brownish. They had gaunt faces, so many pimples and pits, and were very skinny. Total crystal heads. Oh boy, that's the I did my own research crowd of the substance world right there, and an absolute tragedy waiting to happen. Poor kid, I hope he could at least get a pamphlet or something. Worked at a summer camp for a month a couple of years ago. In my bunk, I had a kid come from France. Sweetest kid I've ever met. Looked like he was loving camp. 2 weeks in, we get a call from his mum claiming her son isn't getting enough time to do arts and crafts, which was his favorite. No problem, my supervisor arranges it so I can take my bunk to the Arts and Crafts Center more often. 2 days later, she complains he's still not getting enough and pulls him out of camp. There's no possible way that she could have gotten a letter saying that even if she was staying in Canada, which she was. Letters took at least 4 to 5 days to get to the parents. She just legit ruined her kid's summer, who I spoke to directly in French, and he told me he was having the best time there. I actually adored that kid. He was one of the few not entitled little buttholes I had in my bunk. I hope he was furious at her. She used her own selfishness to ruin his summer trip. I've worked at a large summer camp for the last 4 summers, and I'd been a camper for the 8 previous ones. 4 years ago, my friends and I were essentially counselors in training, and 2 of my friends were given their own cabin of campers as real counselors, as recognition for having done a good job. When being told about the campers they were going to have, they were informed that the parents of one of the campers had sent the camp bottles upon bottles of sugary flavored water, because this kid apparently didn't drink water at all. My friends had to constantly carry around multiple large bottles of this flavored water in their backpacks because the camper refused to drink any real water. And being counselors in training, my friends didn't feel like they were in the place to actually try to do something about it, so they had to suffer through carrying multiple liters of this camper's water for 10 days around a very large camp. The next summer, another of my friends had this camper in his cabin. The camper still wasn't drinking water, but my friend wasn't having it. So for the next 3 weeks, he slowly diluted the flavored water until by the end he was giving the kid just water in the flavored bottles. When he told the camper and the parents at the end of summer, they were all stunned and happy that he was finally able to drink real water. Now the camper still comes to the camp every summer, and from what I can tell, he's just drinking like normal water now. The friend who got him to drink water, by the way, won Counselor of the Year at the camp the following summer. The following are things I had parents ask me to do while I taught. Calling them when their child had homework, not just in my class, but like in general. Like if he has math homework, I, the English teacher, need to call his mother. Call home if he speaks to a certain kid. At all, during the day. I've no idea how I'm supposed to know if they talk to that other kid. To call home if he trades for other food at lunch. I don't even have lunch duty. I asked if it was an allergy concern. Mind you, these were middle school-age kids, not little ones, and the mum said she just wanted to know if he traded. I had to call home if their grade dropped below a 95%. They wanted us to hold an assembly because their son's calculator had been stolen and Dad was convinced he could pick the culprit out of a crowd. No assembly was held, the calculator was found in the bottom of his locker under some paper. And the best one of all was an email I received from a parent asking to please excuse their daughter from reading in an English class. I asked them why and they said they were trying to keep unhealthy ideas out of her head. I told them she was required to read for class and I'd observed her reading for fun several times and she seemed to enjoy it, but that I'd let them know if I saw her reading anything inappropriate. Actually, now that I'm listing it out, I realize that there are just too many. Parents are absurd. Back when I was a teacher, it was parent-teacher conference day and a parent came in. Her son was pretty unremarkable, maybe B or C average kind of student, didn't cause any problems in class. The parent looks livid and ready to fight. I'm not sure why, but they start cussing me out immediately. How dare you let school out early because of a little fricking snow, you fudging butthole! My son had to sit out on the back deck for hours because he doesn't have a key to the house and I was at work so nobody could let him in. Mind you, we let out early a few weeks prior because we were about to get slammed by the snowstorm of the frickin' century and anyone who didn't know that it was coming was an idiot. I told her that I, a mere high school social studies teacher, didn't have the authority to authorize early release and that she should take her issue up with the superintendent. She got livid and was pretty certain that I had something to do with it personally, and continued to cuss me out for 5 more minutes. It was late. It was Valentine's Day. I had a girlfriend I wanted to do things with. I wanted to go home. So I was angry too. I told the lady that maybe she should get her son a key to the house because leaving him outside in the cold for hours was probably worthy of a call to CPS. She got even more livid and threatened to call Child Protection Services on me for doing that to her son, and to tell the principal, school board, FBI, and president that I was mean to her. She at least told the principal because I got a talking to about threatening to call CPS on a parent instead of just doing it. To make things better, my girlfriend was mad because I didn't get home until 8 p.m. So, in summary, the most unreasonable thing a parent asked me to do was use my powers as a teacher in one building to stop the school district from releasing early before a snowstorm, after the fact. One mum threatened to yank her daughter out of the school if she were not given the vocal solo, "Oh Holy Night," during the annual Christmas concert, a situation I described here some time ago. The daughter had made clear to teaching staff and peers that she didn't want to do the solo and that she didn't have the appropriate voice for it. Still, her mum tried to force the faculty into submitting to her will so that her daughter could have the recognition she deserved. Not really something they wanted me to do for their kids, but for their dog. The mum told me that the neighborhood HOA had a big thing about dog poop on people's grass. Fair enough. But I guess even the smear of it on the grass after it gets picked up, because the woman literally asked me if I could put a bag on my hand and try to catch the poop as it fell out of the dog's backside, so as to not leave a smear on people's lawns. I nodded and said, "Oh yeah, sure, of course," and then just picked up the dog poop after he did his business like a normal human being, because I love and respect myself. What the frick? I know that this is way better than outright animal mistreatment, but somehow it feels nearly as disturbing to me. Just waiting under the animal to scoop it out of the air so His Majesty's noble essence doesn't touch the earth? And what sort of behavior is that going to reinforce in the dog? I'm a babysitter. This story still infuriates my parents years later when they run into this guy. I was 12 at the time and was babysitting for a group of 6 kids between the ages of 4 and 8. The parents had all gone out on a date together. They were supposed to be home at 10 p.m. It was a school night and I had to be up by 7 a.m., as did a few of the kids. Anyhow, the night goes on and it passes 10 p.m., then 10:30. The kids are getting restless and tired. The visiting ones don't have PJs or anything, but I tell them bedtime stories to get them prepped for going home. 11 p.m. passes and the kids are falling asleep. I'm calling the parents to ask if I should keep them awake, since kids sometimes have trouble falling back to sleep, and I'm getting no answer from the cell phone. 12 a.m. and the kids are all passed out on couches and the floor. I'm struggling to stay awake by picking up toys. My parents call me at this time asking why I'm not home. I don't want to get in trouble, so I say the group will be home any minute now. They didn't get home until after 3 a.m. The dad was supposed to drive me home and he was super drunk. I thought my parents would be asleep at that time, so I got in the car with the drunk driver. We didn't crash, but he did veer off the road a few times. You could see the track marks through the yards of my neighborhood for a while. Needless to say, my parents didn't let me watch those kids again. So yeah, expecting a 12-year-old to watch 6 kids until 3 a.m. on a school night and then driving her home drunk off your butt. Oh, and they didn't pay me extra for the additional 5 hours I put in. My parents would have definitely come to my aid if I'd asked or called or anything, but I was a dumb kid who thought that I was grown up enough just to handle things on my own rather than ask for help. I also didn't have a concept of drunk at 12 because my parents never had more than a beer or 2 around me. But you'd better believe that when my parents heard the dad was driving funny as he took me home and saw the tracks on a couple of lawns nearby, that my kind and patient father went over there to have a chat with him, and we never heard from that family again. I'm 28 now, and my mum mentioned this story at a neighborhood get-together a few months back, and she was white-knuckled the whole time. My parents are wonderful people, but like Rothfuss says, fear the fury of a patient man. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. Don't forget to subscribe to Am I the Genius? High school teacher. I had a parent ask if she could write in her will that if she died, I'd take custody of her kids. I work at a very expensive summer academic camp that brought in lots of extremely elite teenagers from abroad. One kid got mild sunburn, not blistering or anything, just a bit pink, and his mother called in having a total meltdown and demanded we call him an ambulance and that he go to the hospital. Maybe when you're in the 1% and God knows where that makes sense, but it's absolutely insane in the States. She wouldn't take no for an answer. Another mum from the same camp actually flew from Russia with her 16-year-old daughter and just decided she'd stay too, without telling staff. Parents were 100% not allowed to stay at camp, but she booked a hotel for the full 5-week program and showed up at camp every day. We told her constantly her parents weren't allowed in the dorms, but every day I'd run into her coming in and out of her daughter's room, taking her away from class and activities. Her poor daughter was almost certainly suffering from Munchausen by proxy. This one kid told me he didn't have to listen to me because I'm a girl, so I told him to sit in the corner for 5 minutes and reflect on what he'd said. When his parents came to pick him up, they asked that I don't discipline their children as it's against their religion to take orders from women. Pardon? What religion is it? Chauvinism. It's a branch of buttholism. I was a babysitter from a wealthy family. They had a house nanny that lived with them, but she also had to do all the chores, cooking, grocery shopping and stuff, so they asked me to occasionally basically help the live-in nanny. I was in college, so I needed the money. They were bat crap. I knew that before I started though. The dad was a liver specialist doctor, and the mother was a child psychologist. They had 2 dogs, and instead of making sure that they got let outside on routine, they just placed potty training mats all over this massive 4-story house. The parents were obsessed with Star Wars, which I thought was cool, but I realized it was more of a crazy money sink for them. The dad had life-size replicas of most of the main cast, and unless he escorted you into the room that he kept them in, he kept it locked. Not even wife or kids were allowed in, which in itself isn't creepy, but he spent more on those collections than his kids. Also, the mum used to leave her used tampons and pads just anywhere. I'm pretty sure she just changed them whenever she needed, and if a garbage can wasn't near, she'd leave it on the coffee table instead of using the bathroom or something. Anyways, oldest boy was 11, middle sister was 9, and the youngest brother was 2. Pretty easy money most of the time. But the oldest boy at 11 always did weird things, and they told me to never deny the kids outright, but to use positive language to them only. Sure, whatever. So this 11-year-old, I caught him looking at skin flicks, and well, I couldn't tell him to stop. So I just said, "Do you think your parents would be okay with that?" And he did stop, but I caught him a lot more. The family PC was always just right in the open, and when I told the parents, they didn't seem to care. Fine. Well, then this boy asks me if he can see my chest. And I said no. He told his mother, who's never used the word no to these kids, and somehow I was in trouble for telling him no. Like, I shouldn't have to defend why I said that, right? Skip ahead a bit and this kid is slapping my butt now, and I talked to the dad when he gets home from work, and he told me to allow him because he's a straight, almost teen male who's just expressing his feelings. So I tried to explain to a doctor why that was legally problematic, and at 11 he might get away with it, but by 14 he might not be so lucky. I figured I'd have better luck with the child psychologist mother. Nope, she basically agreed that he was healthily expressing his interest in women. Felt like I was the only sane person in the world. They fired me because I was repressing their children. I really hope the kids grow up okay. The other 2 kids were sweet, but the oldest was a real troublemaker. And years later I heard they got a divorce because the youngest turned out not to be the child of her husband. Well, the divorce is a pity. I'm sorry for these 2 people who've both left the only person who might have tolerated them. Oh, who am I kidding? They're rich. Somehow. It's frankly worrying that the woman is a child psychologist and that both of them take that view of a woman's agency. Really setting up your kids for failure there, guys. I teach English in France in a nicer area of Paris. Because it's a nicer area, most of my students have been exposed to English most of their lives and speak it conversationally, if not fluently. And I've been asked more than once to teach the class in French. Not just give instructions in French or use both French and English to help the kids that are struggling, but just to speak French for my full 55-minute English lesson. Most of the time it was because the kids weren't doing their work, were goofing off in class and failing because of it, and then they just told their parents it was because I wasn't using French, so they blamed me because there was no way their angel would have lied to them. One kid did this when he spoke fluent, accentless English, and his spelling was better than mine in English most of the time. I've also been told I should do a kid's homework for him, since I'm an American and therefore a native speaker, and if I do it and he studies using it, he'll pick up on things easier. One kid was being toilet trained. Camp policy was that children being toilet trained were given chocolate chips. This girl's mother didn't want her daughter eating so much sugar, so instead she gave us a snack box of tiny, hard raisins. We were supposed to give her 1 raisin every time she successfully went to potty. This was, of course, enormously successful. I'm 55 and I would poop my pants right here and now if I thought pooping in the toilet was only worth 1 raisin to somebody. If he misbehaves, don't hit him. Hit the kid next to him. That'll scare him into behaving. I hope you answered, Wow, that's exactly what the parents of the kids on either side of him ask for as well. Former middle school lacrosse referee. So many parents wanted to amend the rulebook if I dropped a flag on one of their little angels. I'm a nanny. I work for a wonderful family now, but about 5 years ago when I was young and stupid, I worked for a really difficult family. I stayed with them for longer than I should have because I really loved the kids. The mother was very particular. She'd ask me to clean the kitchen all the time, and if there was so much as a tiny fluff or crumb on the floor, she'd ask me to clean it again. It got to the point where I was sometimes swiffering the kitchen floor 4 times a day, after every meal and before I left at 7:30 at night. She'd frequently ask me to get to her house early. I woke up at 5:30 a.m. just to get there on time. And honestly, when I'd arrive early, the door would be locked and everybody would be asleep. However, the straw that broke the camel's back was when I'd taken 2 of the babies out to the park because the housekeeper was coming that morning and I wanted to get her out of the way. The mom texted me right after I'd gotten to the park and told me to come back to the house and clean up the kids' toys before the housekeeper came, because it wasn't the housekeeper's job to pick up the toys. The fact that this lady didn't want the housekeeper to have to pick up the 5 toys that were on the floor because it wasn't part of her job description, yet she'd have me cleaning the kitchen 4 times a day, which certainly wasn't part of my job description, coupled with the fact that she was at home with no kids and wouldn't pick up the toys herself, made me so furious and I felt like I wasn't being valued at all. I quit shortly after. As an infant teacher at preschool, I had multiple parents who used cloth diapers. That didn't bug me. Standard procedure was that they'd provide some kind of smell-proof bag for us to put the soiled diapers in. No big deal. One mother, though, insisted we rinsed her daughter's soiled cloth diapers in the toilets at my work, even after the directors of the preschool told her we wouldn't be doing that. She got so mad at us for not rinsing the soiled diapers that she stopped providing the smell-proof bag for us. It was really gnarly. I worked as a camp counselor for a local art camp. It was just during the day, and the camps only lasted 5 days each. You wouldn't believe the amount of parents who would drop off their severely autistic kids to people who have 0 special training and are already dealing with a group of 20 to 30 kids. Like, these kids would be non-verbal, freak out at the amount of commotion going on, and they'd always end up just staying with our main education officer all day, while the parent was claiming their kid was just a little shy. Those parents pretty much just treated us as a cheap daycare. Worked at a gymnastics day camp this past summer. Had a parent come in and request that the TOTS director, in charge of the 5 to 7-year-olds, have her child poop in a bag and look through it and try to find the coin that the kid had swallowed the day before. We sent that kid home for the day. The parents of some kid I used to babysit were on a holiday in France about 100 kilometers away from where my parents and I were camping. They asked me if I could drop by and babysit their daughter while they went out to dinner. I cannot say it enough, nobody can babysit your kid while you are home. I had to do it for an entire summer while the kid's mum worked from home. It was the most frustrating and dysfunctional summer of my life. The children would constantly scream and cry for their mother, and even if they forgot that their mum was just in another room for a few minutes, she'd cough or go get a glass of water or something, and the kids would start wailing again. When I went to summer camp, they had move-in day, when all the parents would drive the kids to camp, and we'd pick up our bunks and set our things up. The counselors were there to help with heavy stuff, but generally they let us do it. Then I went to work at a camp in the Catskills, straight out of wet, hot American summer. The kids got their bags sent to camp ahead of the buses from the tri-state area. We were expected to carry all of their huge, heavy bags to the cabin and set up all of their stuff at their bunks. Of course, when the kids got theirs, they'd complain about which bunk they had or that we didn't do it right. And that was my intro to this camp with the most spoiled group of little B-words I've ever met. Inside the minds of dangerous criminals. Their crimes and sides of the story. My dad was a cook for my entire life. I learned everything I knew about cooking from him. He used to be a pilot. He had a pilot's license, he had all the gear, everything. I never questioned it. One day while we were working together, it kind of popped into my head that I never knew why my dad was a pilot. Did he fly commercially? For fun? Who knows? I asked him and he candidly gave me a nice account of his life. You see, he had used to fly white snow and weapons out of the Carolinas into New York. Then he showed me his leg where he'd been shot during a takeoff when they'd done a deal, and they opened fire on the plane as he left because they thought they'd gotten screwed. He told me that when my mother was pregnant with me, that his substance people wanted him to work down in Cancun with them because they were opening a club. They had all the permits, they had the contracts, all of it paid off in substance and weapons money. My dad made the choice not to move to Cancun with me, as he wanted me to grow up in New York instead. His friends eventually opened the club and everything went great for them. They kept asking my dad to come down and be their chef. They'd pay for everything. They were making a ton of money. Eventually, the club was raided, and it turns out all the permits they'd gotten were part of a sting from the Mexican government. They'd known the people who were opening the club were dealers, and they were simply waiting for them to pool all of their connections in one place. Everyone was arrested and sent to prison. Some of them didn't even get out until the 2000s. I basically found out that both of my parents were doing white snow themselves. Never would have guessed it, to be honest. My dad didn't regret it, and he said that he still did it for fun about once a month. He stopped when a friend of his died suddenly of a heart attack after doing a bump and opening a bottle of beer in a bar. My father eventually passed away from kidney cancer. I miss him every day, of course. He gave me my love of science and an education. Gave me my appreciation of good quality food, too. My sense of humor as well. I look just like him. And now I am tearing up. My ex-boss hounded me for 2 weeks about finding him an ounce of some green herb. One day he said that he had back problems and he really needed something. I felt sorry for him, so I was able to find him an ounce of some bud and I sold it to him. 3 days short of a year later, I was arrested and charged with a felony. I don't sell the stuff, I'm not a dealer. I was able to pinpoint the only time I've ever sold anything to anyone. Now I'm stuck with a Class D felony for distribution of Mary J. It frickin' sucks, man. Apparently, if they'd waited a full year, the evidence would have been null and void. I really wish I could have been out of state at the time. My ex-boss was a confidential informant of the local police department to where they had a private investigator take pictures of me mid-deal. That sucks. Really narc move of your former boss. I mean, you weren't a dealer to begin with, and he knew that. So he what? He guilted you into doing the only actual crime you'd ever done with a tearjerker story and then got you? What the heck was he getting out of this? Cop cred for taking down a problem he created? This is entrapment, right? I am technically guilty of murder. My dad had Lou Gehrig's disease, and I helped him get a high dose of Nembutal. We kept it for a couple of months until he stopped basically being able to communicate. Eventually, he was losing control of his hands, but he really wanted to take the stuff himself. So, we mixed it with some porridge, it goes down easier, and he took some antiemetics over the course of the day. Then, in the evening, he ate the porridge with the crazy green stuff in it, and he died. Where I live, this is murder. My dad was dying, though, with no possible hope of a cure. He couldn't speak, he choked constantly, he could barely sleep, and by the end he could only use 2 of his fingers. His life was hell. He didn't want to live and had said it would get to that point from the moment he was diagnosed. One of his parents had also died in the same way. I regret nothing, by the way. I'm just thankful it's not the known genetic form. I had a plan to off my mother, but I never went through with it. The story is that she was a smack addict that cleaned up her life and had actually become a substance and alcohol counselor when I went to live with her when I was 14. By the time I was 16, she had started to overuse prescription meds and our relationship was getting increasingly bad. She'd keep me up at night being loud and on something. Sometimes she'd wake me up at random times to cry and tell me she wanted to not be alive anymore, that her life was miserable, and she'd apologize for being such a crappy mum. And then, in the morning, she'd grab me by the ankle and pull me out of bed, yelling the whole time about how stupid I was and how ungrateful I was and how I was such a terrible kid. Looking back, it was a textbook domestic mistreatment of your kid. One second she was telling me she was the only person who actually loved me, then the next tearing me down and telling me I wasn't anything, that I shouldn't go to college. She tried to convince me not to go to school or work or to hang out with my friends. She threw things at me, shoved me around, and would block the door when I tried to leave the room rather than fight with her. After months of escalating behavior, not being able to sleep at night, not having any food in the house except when I'd buy it, I just snapped. I started to plan her faked self-deletion. I was going to feed her every pill in her pill box. It was literally a 10-gallon Tupperware filled with pill bottles. The reason I didn't end up trying it is actually because other people tried to get her before and it didn't work. Also, I wasn't really sure how I was going to get her to take all of those pills without showing evidence of a struggle. Eventually, I broke down and told my best friend what was going on. She immediately told her parents, and I went to live with her until I went to college. I attacked many people at night. There was a lot of the unspeakable act happening along the paths that follow the river through my town. I used to watch The Dark Knight and do smack and then go out looking for trouble. I got into a very serious altercation when the guy was essentially ready for me one time. I hit him in the face with a big branch and pushed him into the river. But he had been following this girl for about half an hour. I watched and waited patiently. I mean, that's kind of frickin' awesome. Na-na-na-na-na-na-na-na-na-na-na-na-na-na-na, dope man. But seriously though, you could have died. Which is why I don't do it anymore. I was half proud and half ashamed that I did it, but I seriously don't F around with R-wordists. This other guy I know pulled that crap, and we stopped him at an intersection, ripped him out of his car, and beat him within an inch of his life. He moved to Texas the next week. It gets me so mad. About 13 years ago, my sister, a teen at the time, started dating her first boyfriend. That kid was 19. He was completely obsessed, he'd verbally say and send things to her that wrecked her self-esteem, stuff like that. As far as I know, his bullying never got physical, but after she broke up with him, he'd creep around our parents' house, call the house at 3 a.m. just to hang up and threaten her. He pretty much managed to get me mad. So, said gentleman worked at a driving school where he corrected test quizzes after hours. I drove there one evening with a friend to give him one last warning. He told me to F off or he'd call the cops. So my friend and I took out my friend's aluminium baseball bat from the trunk, tuned up the kid's car a bit, and when he came outside, took one good swing at his legs. Then I told him he could call the cops now. He never did. The phone calls stopped, and I never saw him again. Not quite a dramatic story, but it's all I've got. I broke into my old primary school when I was around 18. I say broke in, I put my hand through the letterbox and turned the door handle. It was one of those safety doors that could only be opened from the inside. I then stole a few hundred elastic bands and ate all of the biscuits in the staff room. Like a rebel. Yeesh, man. Thug life. My family has about 700 acres about an hour south of where we live. I drive down there about 2 times every month in the fall and winter to hunt deer, dove, and quail. Last winter I drove down and pulled back onto the back of the property. I equipped myself with my .40 sidearm and I slung on my .30-06. I like to walk the property because I think it's easier to sneak up on the wildlife than having a 4x4 scaring them off. I was walking around the property when I walked out of some trees and I see a truck with 2 guys sitting on the tailgate with hunting weapons and beers. I walked up to them very nicely and casually. They look at me and ask like, "How's it going?" I said, "Fine, but why are you guys here?" They mumble a few words and then ask me the same question. I respond, "Well, my family and I own this ranch." Then they look confused for a second and then one of them grabs his gun and proceeds to chamber it. I turn and start running my butt off into the woods. I hear 2 shots fired off in my general direction. I drop to the ground behind some brush, grab my .30-06, I chamber it, look through my scope and point it at the mother fricker who I think shot at me. I aim at his upper leg. I was about 75 yards away, and a .30-06 shot at that distance would tear someone up. I fired, and I heard a terrifying cry. I got up and hoofed it back to my car and called the sheriff. They came out and I reported the trespassers and told the sheriff the whole story. About 2 days later, the one guy gets arrested at a local hospital for a bullet wound to the hip. He now has to walk with a cane for the rest of his life because he tried to unalive me and I wouldn't let him. For some reason in my first read-through I assumed you were a kid or something for some reason, not sure why. Why on earth would your first instinct when you're caught out on someone's land to be just open fire on the owner? Even if it works, how is that less problematic than just leaving? The guy can only blame himself. I once beat the crap out of my neighbor for bullying my brother and being a creep to my sisters. He had 4 inches and 40 pounds on me and I still won. He went to the hospital and I went home to tell my dad what happened. I got high fives and taken out for ice cream. I don't care. The cops knew. A man tried to mug me and I proceeded to beat the ever-loving crap out of him for it. It was a fight or flight reflex and my instant, unthinking reaction was to go completely berserk. I kind of blacked out and I had to be pulled off the guy and his whole face was bloody and he was unconscious. I got arrested and questioned and the police eventually let me go because he decided not to press charges. My reaction was above and beyond acceptable force, hence the possibility of me being charged with a crime. Honestly, I don't regret it. Maybe the mother fricker will think twice before he approaches a 5'2" woman and thinks he can scare her into turning over what little money she has. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. Don't forget to subscribe to Am I the Genius? Vandal and arson. The neighbor down the street from us took my dog from us. She was a little older than a puppy and very sweet. One night our doggo tunneled out from our backyard and I had to run after her. I thought she was in some bushes, but I was wrong. I was crouching in these bushes looking for her when I saw my neighbor's minivan run her down. They backed up, hit her again, backed up, and ran over her once more before they left. For some reason, I didn't feel like telling my parents because that was a bad story. It was better to just say she didn't suffer and that it was quick. In the meantime, I was breaking their sprinkler system, and I sprinkled weed killer on their yard so that the grass and flowers turned brown. They had 4 cars, and I broke all of their windows and stole all of their radios. I had no idea how to steal radios, so it turned out horrible. I ruined their wood paneling. The car alarms went off, but nobody came out. I carefully stuck nails into their yard by the ladder, by the recycling bin, and by the sprinkler timer so there'd be a greater chance of one of them stepping onto the nails. They installed cameras by the house, so I didn't want to risk going inside. When they installed the new glass windows, I broke them again and I set fire to the inside. It didn't feel like anything to me. It was boring. I should have left my poor dog on their pillow to remind them of what they did. I should have taken their miniature poodles and dropped them off at the Humane Society several towns over. I should have taken a knife to all their furniture and left pictures of dead dogs in every room of that house. I should have poured animal blood in their bedrooms and filled all of their orange juice and milk with blood. But that requires energy I don't have. Plus, where the heck are you going to get all of that blood? I'm not a psychopath. A number of years ago, I was at a party, heavily liquored up, when all of a sudden a fight broke out. When I noticed one of my friends was getting beat up, I jumped in to save him, and thus got the crap kicked out of me by a number of juiced-up gentlemen. In the midst of the chaos and between consciousness and drunkenness, I managed to get the pocket knife out of my pocket, and I latched on to the nearest motherfricker I could get my hands on. I ended up on the back of the biggest guy and I slashed him up real good. He made it to the hospital to get stitches and, rather than press charges, declared a vendetta. The state thought differently and carried through with the charges themselves. They charged me with attempted manslaughter and assault with a deadly weapon. I took a deal and did 395 days in a medium security state penitentiary. I haven't seen him since, but I know we both have families, lives, and futures. My only hope is that he's long since forgiven me and now lives in peace. Kidnapping, assault, vandalism, and arson, I guess. My best friend's sister was dating a guy that my friend did not approve of. When he found out, things got pretty ugly, to put it lightly. His sister needed hospitalization, and, well, the rest of us snapped. The community in the area at the time was quite close-knit, and he was from a different part of town, so one night he was driving into our neck of the woods before he was knocked off the road by a diversion sign. His car got smacked into a tree, and we pulled him out before throwing him into a van after setting that car on fire. We drove him south over the border after giving him a kicking ourselves, and we warned him if he ever came back near that part of town, he wouldn't live to see it. After that, we threw him out and drove back home. Needless to say, he was never seen in the area again. Also, the reason the cops didn't do much was because this part of town was well known for constant hijackings, attacks, sectarianism, and stuff like that. Top it all off with a close-knit community of people that they knew weren't going to rat us out either. I crashed a motorcycle with a friend on the back who later died. She was rather drunk, and in mid-left-hand turn, she leaned really hard to the right, causing the bike to hit a curb and both of us to fall off. I flew about 30 feet into some bushes, and she fell straight down by the curb. It was about 2 a.m., so nobody else was on the road. She was unconscious the whole time. Ambulances came and took us away. She was induced into a coma. I went straight to jail to await her outcome. Once the family ended the life support, I was sent to a state prison camp to finish out a year of incarceration. I'd been drinking, and that didn't improve the situation. I wasn't charged with a DUI, just regular vehicular manslaughter. I owe $500,000 in restitution for medical bills, and I'm a felon for a minimum of 15 years. I feel horrible for everything, and I'd change it if I could. I'm very fortunate to only go to jail for 1 year. Being in the real world is more difficult than I thought it would be. Nobody will hire me due to the felony. I moved out of state to California where the probation is much more relaxed, and I'm able to live my life. Still no jobs, but it's a little better in general. Someone committed the unspeakable act on a friend of mine, and she wouldn't go to the police about it. The guy was drunk, and my friend doesn't drink, by the way. I caught the guy from behind one night by chance, and I beat and kicked the crap out of him, took his wallet, and left. We lived in a bad area at the time, and a guy getting mugged late at night was nothing more than a statistic. I figured a completely random beating might have drawn more attention. I later found out that he'd done the same thing to at least one other woman, and I have zero regrets, beyond not thinking enough to aim for his groin more. I'm pretty sure I'd have a lot more trouble sleeping at night if I'd done nothing, to be honest. Well, yeah. Can't say that I condone many, if any, of the vigilante justice taken in these stories, and our viewers should take away that you should always pursue the legal action in situations like this. That said, I'm not sad that this happened to the guy and some of the others like him. I got caught with a crapload of Mary J. 120 hours of community service and 14 substance and alcohol classes later, and I'm free. Newt Gingrich wanted the death penalty for anyone with more than 2 ounces. He would have killed me, twice over. Victimless, non-violent crimes shouldn't be handled so harshly. Had I had a record or been a minority at the time, I'd probably be sitting in prison right now. I got a sunburn, but I'm in the US Navy, so technically that's destruction of government property. I'm not kidding. I robbed an old lady substance dealer at weapon point. The plan was just to get a pound of green herb, but it turned into this huge pain in the butt when we first showed up. This lady was a junkie and had junkies all over the house. I was getting teed off because she kept giving me and my friend the runaround. You should have seen the bathroom. It was full of holes from the junkies thinking the drywall was just more stuff for them. She had a 7-year-old son that got home from school, and she had us watching him while she went out to go get the herb. I got even more furious when the little boy told me that his mother makes him play his video games on the computer so she can take her medicine. It was frickin' solitaire on the computer. Anyway, she got back and obviously she's short, and somehow I got some pills that I didn't want because I'm guessing she thought she could steal from me. So we're in the back room and I pull out a gat and told her I'm taking everything and the money. I'm not paying for anything. I also told her she was a horrible mother and I'm calling child services. She flipped out, telling me she'll find me and I was a dead man. When I left, I called child services and I never heard anything about it again. A guy pushed me over in a bar. I'm a girl, by the way. This guy had a previous for attacking women as well. He'd punched his ex in the face and been to court for bottling a lady, but he'd never been sentenced because there wasn't enough evidence. But yeah, he pushed me over and I just snapped. I hit him in the face with the pint glass I was holding and the whole thing broke in his face. There was a lot of red. The cops were called. I was being really calm and coherent. I was cooperating with them so they didn't cuff me. I got in the car with them and I was held in a cell overnight. Couple of no-comment interviews later and I was free. I went to court and pled guilty. Got 180 hours of community service, £285 and a 6-week exclusion order from bars, pubs and clubs. Looking back, I overreacted. But that guy deserved it. I still have glass in my hand to this day, and this happened about 2 or 3 months ago. In short, glassed a guy for being a woman-beating C-word. It was about 12 a.m. when I found myself in the town of Orange on the Friday of my work week. Using Reddit and Encyclopedia Dramatica, I was familiar with who Chris Chan was and pretty sure that he lived nearby. A quick search on my phone pulled up his address and it turned out it was half an hour away according to the GPS. I finished work up at approximately 12:30 a.m. Being that my company provided me with a work vehicle and covered all of my gas without asking questions regarding mileage, I drove my unmarked work vehicle to his home, parked down the street, and crept up to the back of his car and stole the plate off the back. This is much easier than it sounds, because Chris's house is the only house on the entire street that has a lamplight on at night. The back of the vehicle was also under shade from a tree, and I was wearing dark clothing. In any case, I didn't make enough noise removing the license plate to stir up our man-baby hero in the process of nicking the plate. It sounds like a lot of effort, but it's really not when you're used to driving 6 to 10 hours a day for work sometimes. In short, immature, but yeah. I stole Chris Chan's license plate off the back of his car. I now have a Virginia state license plate with the letters Sonny Chu sitting in my home, waiting for whatever to be done with it. I suppose in the eyes of the law, I am a dangerous criminal. Last year, I was convicted of grievous bodily harm with intent. We were out one evening and my friend got in a fight with a guy. I didn't stop it and he ended up in hospital. Because I didn't stop in to help the guy afterwards and didn't phone the police, I was charged under a UK law called joint venture, which made me as legally accountable for his actions as he was. I got a 3-month custodial suspended for 1 year, my housemate got 3 years. The only reason I wasn't sent to prison is that I'm currently at university and it would have cost me my place. Standing in court on my 23rd birthday being sentenced was the most ball-shattering, terrifying moment of my life. I ended a man. I have no regrets. I was never caught and in the same situation, I'd do it again, because I honestly believe it was him or me. He tried to mug me, I didn't let him, and he got violent. When he pulled a knife, I decided it was all or nothing, so yeah, he died. I didn't care, and I got away from the scene. I felt no guilt, and I still don't, but I was terrified about being caught. It probably went down as just another dosed-up scumbag getting his comeuppance. I honestly do not care. He attacked, he had a weapon, and I protected myself. One less dangerous person at large. More manslaughter, but whatever. I ended him, and I sleep easy at night. When I was an adolescent, I synthesized methamphetamine regularly. I obtained precursors, reagents, and glassware from my school's chemistry lab. I was the teacher assistant. I used online message boards to learn the synthesis method. I did small-scale red, white, and blue reaction. I also dealt other stuff like white snow, crystal, mushrooms, and Mary J. I traveled abroad numerous times, returning to the States, each time with loads of stuff for personal use and reselling. What can I say? I thought I was clever and was incredibly frickin' stupid. I'm immensely grateful that I never got in trouble. Now I'm mostly a law-abiding student and a moderately successful artist. I do still get those thrill-seeking urges, but I try to keep my mischief to wheat pasting and going 5 miles over the speed limit. From pride to pain, parents reveal their biggest disappointments in their adult children. He got a $200,000 inheritance when his father passed away 2 years ago. He's broke now. He's 24 years old and has a full-blown crystal addiction that started in the last 6 months. He was fired from the job that he got at 18 because he was under the influence and manic. As a sidebar, his manager was the one that introduced him to the stuff. Since then, he's dedicated his time to either finding or using crystal. He's been arrested 3 times and spent 30 days in jail and continues to use even though he's on probation. He's angry because we won't allow him to live with us while he's using. He's now homeless. He broke into our house and stole some of his father's sports memorabilia to support his habit. Some of it's not replaceable and very sentimental. He's a shell of the person we knew 6 months ago, both figuratively and literally. We can't hold a normal conversation and he's constantly twitching. We've offered to get him help, but he's convinced that the substances have set him free and we're all living in a delusional world where we have to work and conform to society. It's killing us. On the other hand, our daughter, 23, just graduated college in June with a paralegal degree, and she's decided to go to law school. She's afraid to celebrate her success because she doesn't want to make him feel bad or upset him, but F him for taking that away from her. My son is 25 and was diagnosed with bipolar disorder at around 15 years old, maybe younger. After he became too old and too big for me to manage his meds, he refused to take them, and his life has been a roller coaster of disasters ever since. Between prison time, both juvie and adult, bad decisions, self-deleting ideation, substance use, fathering 2 children he doesn't see from the same mother, and insisting on making up reasons to not speak to me, I'm done. Because honestly, there's nothing I can do for him. At this point, I'm just waiting to get a phone call where I need to go and identify a body. He's 20 and refuses to go to college or get a job. He lives with his mum, so all I can do is talk to him about it. I fear for his future. Like, his parents, aren't immortal, and he doesn't seem to have any self-preservation skills. Some people do struggle with motivation after they leave school. Mostly it doesn't last forever, though I was definitely like your son. Hopefully he can find a program or even just a hobby that he feels okay doing to maybe start looking at something that he enjoys and that interests him. Not me, but my uncle. We're born and raised in West Germany. We're Kurdish of origin. My father and uncle lived an incredibly hard life back in Turkey with very strict parents. My uncle wanted his children to live a different life, with an understanding father figure. It was his first child, and yeah, he enabled him, but he was never a doormat, he just did what he thought was best for his son, because he had never had an understanding father figure. He's a very kind and hard-working man who did everything for my cousins. While the younger ones are decent and successful people, the oldest one was always a bit of a piece of work. He never finished school or worked in his entire life, and at the same time he belittled my uncle for his work. Said things like he wouldn't even leave his bed for the money my uncle makes, that he's stupid for working for someone else, and that he doesn't understand life. They always believed in him. They gave him money so he could open his own stores, or bought him expensive cars and stuff so he'd get motivated and do something with his life. After about 10 years, the guy's 28 now, and a lot of money later, he asked for it again. My uncle told him basically that he wants to see a business plan first and that he has to wait about 3 months because they're renovating the house. My cousin threw a tantrum and left for a while. In the meantime, his parents renewed the first floor, walls, floor, bathroom, including furniture in his and his brother's rooms. Guys, one day my cousin came back while nobody was home and just lost it. Called my uncle and screamed something about how he has to wait for his money while they're spending it for themselves. And then he smashed the place. Everything, new and old, he ripped out the floor and destroyed the bathroom. There was water everywhere and smashed in walls. He slashed furniture and destroyed his brother's electronics. He had to be so angry. I was speechless when I saw it. They threw him out. They took his keys and we haven't heard from him since. But on the way out, he fought with his father and called his mother a B-word without provocation. It just broke my uncle's heart. He isn't the same man anymore. Yes, my cousin has mental problems. There's no diagnosis as we can't force him to a psychologist. At this point, it could be everything from depression to narcissism. He's never had a substance or alcohol problem as far as I know. As another commenter here wrote, some people just seem to be rotten. Pathological liar. 33 years old and he'd rather walk 10 miles to tell a lie than to stand still and tell the truth. His ex-wives all found out the same thing. I'm not disappointed in my 18-year-old, but I sure wish I knew how to activate him. He graduated in May, has no desire to go to college and no real aspirations at all. He's pretty much been in his room on his phone since. He's struggled for many years with anxiety, which we're treating, and I know a lot of things are difficult for him, but man, I just wish I knew how to get him excited about anything, whether it's a job or a hobby or a plan or whatever. At 18, I was exactly the same. I didn't really care about anything. I certainly didn't feel like an adult. I'm just shy of 23 now, and I did come out of it, slowly and painfully. At the same time, not everyone I know did. Some of my friends are in exactly the same place they were at the end of high school, except that they got a job instead of school. So you can't just sit back and hope he figures it out either. I'd suggest helping him cultivate a healthy personal life more so than pushing him to start making money. Hobbies are a great help, especially if they push him to be a little more social. I spent absurd amounts of time as a teen holed up in my room with my guitar, and that skill eventually led to me branching out and meeting people at jam sessions. He's 42, he lives with his dad, and is now 6 years into a 2-year degree. He's gone through 4 decent cars in the last 6 months. His dad bought the cars, and he trashed them. He's also threatened physical attacks to his dad. He disowned his older sister over a political argument on Facebook. She said I'm leaving this discussion before we say things we'll regret, and he tried to forbid it, saying if she left she was disrespecting him and was no longer related to him. Okay, I'm reading other people's comments here to see what I can do to be a better child to my parents while I still have the chance. In short, don't be a jerk, follow your dreams, be independent while also spending time with your parents. I'm a little disappointed in my son because he's too much like me. He's a solid introvert who's afraid to ask for help and doesn't want to bother people, even with very legitimate requests. He's an expert procrastinator. I remember being that age and being so much like that. I'm not sure how I got through university, but I've also been a successful engineer for 30 years, so I've still got a lot of hope for him. Also, both of my kids vape and smoke. We've been anti-smokers for all of our adult lives, and I'm sad to see them choose to do something negative like that. They both apparently want to quit, but it's a tough road. For those of you who don't have disappointing adult children, I can always be yours. Same, I'll call to beg for money and everything. He's 31 and he's been a hardcore smack addict since age 15. He's put us all through hell. I'm disappointed and we're estranged, but he's still my son and I love him. No drive, no ambition, and no work ethic worth a damn. He's 25 and he peaked in the 6th grade. Oh, hey, Mom. My ex-husband was the son that my parents wanted their actual son to be, so they're mad that my brother isn't like him, and they're mad that I divorced him. Double whammy. Never mind that we were just fundamentally not working as a couple. They basically see it as me stealing away their chance at having the perfect child in a son-in-law. Oh well. I'll tell you why I'm disappointed in my son. We took the Ancestry.com test, and he doesn't share my genetic background at all. Maybe it's not actually my son who disappointed me. Oh, I clicked this link because for some reason I was looking to hate myself more. I found fewer reasons for that, surprisingly. Well played, Internet. Because they're now 30, still in my basement and looking at crap that I think's going to bring the feds to my house soon on the internet. My son is 24 and by some standards a disappointment. He has a degree and no job. He struggles with motivation and his sleep patterns are terrible. I don't think he has a plan to move forward with his life. Earlier in the year, my husband, his dad, was diagnosed with cancer. I thank God every day for my slacker son. He's so kind. Every time he makes dinner, because I know you must be tired, or comes and gives me a hug when I get home from work, makes it possible for me to keep going. It's great that you can be thankful for his compassion and sensitivity. Also, having a degree in this day and age is no guarantee of getting a job. It is brutal out there. Your son seems like a good egg, better than most. I hope both of your situations get better. Not a parent, but some current drama in my family has my parents pretty upset with my brother. He's 20 years old and the youngest sibling of 8. He does get spoiled for being the youngest, and he also misses out on a lot because he's the youngest. I'm almost 10 years older than him. We're fairly close though. He was having trouble maintaining a job, so his dad got him hired as an assistant in his painting business. All he had to do was show up and do easy tasks, and he'd have the hours needed to pay for his car and living expenses. He did just fine for a couple of months, but then Mum and Dad went on holiday. He went home early without telling anyone one day, and then the next day he pulled a no-show. So his dad gets a call that he didn't show up and he won't answer his phone. Dad tried to call him and got no answer over several hours. Finally, my mum got through to his girlfriend, who said that my brother told her he'd talked to my dad and he had said he could have the day off. Well, that was a complete lie. My brother is required to make regular payments to my parents for the car they helped him buy. As long as he keeps making payments, he has access to the car. If he misses a payment, he loses access to the car until he pays. He decided to get a delivery job that doesn't give enough hours to make his car payment, but still requires his car. So he says he's got this job and he needs his car, so he's allowed to keep his car even though he's missing payments. Everyone just found out he doesn't even have a delivery job, or a job at all, so he's lost his car and all references for a new job. His girlfriend hasn't been too impressed with the lying either. Also, I'm not really taking sides in it. I don't approve of my parents giving him handouts and babying him, but I also don't approve of any of his behavior that he's picked up from the crowd he hangs out with. They're both the idiots here and to an extent the victims. I just sit off to the side and observe with popcorn. It's between them and I hope they'll figure it out. He's a deadbeat dad for his first daughter, which means I can't see my first granddaughter anymore. He's been in and out of jail since the age of 11. He's a multiple offense convicted felon as an adult, who will steal from anyone, myself and his mother included, and has threatened to have most of his family members killed. He's been known to carry stolen firearms and frequently uses his brother's name to try and avoid being caught. He's a substance addict, living with a substance-addicted girl, and now they have 2 more children together, both of whom suffer from the effects of their parents' habits. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. Don't forget to subscribe to Am I the Genius? My mother's disappointed that I left a £33,000 a year job for a £28,000 one because I had 2 mental breakdowns. Even though everything now is perfect, she says, "Sometimes we just have to get on with it, you know." I'm still not sure what my parents think of me. I was the promised child who got 99th percentile on aptitude tests in kindergarten, who aced tests and memorized the presidents by age 4, at my dad's insistence. And then I ended up just blundering my way through school because what started as a bad habit of not doing homework eventually amalgamated into depression-driven apathy about education. I dropped out of college and I've spent more of my time in therapy learning how to be a good person and be happy. Which does make my mum happy, but I can feel my entire extended family's disappointment in me that I chose to work an 8-to-5 job and just live in an apartment with my cat. On the bright side, I've been more confident in my life choices than I've ever been, and I wouldn't trade the positive mindset I've been working so hard on for any amount of work discipline. I can't blame you. Mental health is everything when it comes to a stable life. Being happy is something that more people should prioritize. My dad always told me, "I don't care if you dig ditches as your career, as long as you're happy doing it." I'm taking some risks now to try and do what will make myself happy in the future, and I've not looked back. Reading this has strengthened my resolve to do what makes me happy. I sincerely hope you have a really happy life. Ooh, good timing. I have to be semi-vague, but hopefully you get the gist of it. My middle daughter is 19, but we've had issues her entire life. I strongly suspect bipolar disorder or narcissism. Currently, her infant child has been removed from her care by CPS for multiple reasons, notably her erratic behavior she showed and continues to show, and also heavy Mary J use. We suspect other substances at play, but we've got zero proof. Instead of cooperating to get her child back, she's fought kicking and screaming every step of the way, making it much harder than necessary. At the same time, blaming her mother and vilifying her to the point that she's lied to CPS in an attempt to have them remove her 4-year-old sister from her mother's care. Calling old friends and family, giving them a hugely false story in an attempt to alienate her mother and have zero friends or help. It's a giant mess she's created and refuses to take any blame or acknowledge that she's the issue at all with. He doesn't like garlic bread and plays the violent farming simulator. End him. Right now, right here. Not liking garlic bread? What the frick? Destroy your mistake of a child. Right now! My mum is extremely disappointed in me because I'm not having kids. It was apparently my sole purpose in life. I'm in the middle of becoming estranged from my parents. They don't approve of how I'm raising my sons, and they can't even bring themselves to be around them. Our last attempt at a family vacation left my sisters yelling at my parents and then storming off. Their complaint is that I don't have any boundaries for the kids. I do have boundaries, they just aren't the same as my dad had when I was growing up. He was a real hardliner with major anger issues. He threw me up a stairwell once when I left my boots behind at a park. Due to living in that household, I'm attempting to let my kids grow up thinking that making mistakes is part of life, you just have to learn from it. In any event, my children are apparently monsters and he can't get over that, so I'm about to cut him and my stepmom out of our lives. My goal is to raise kids who are respectful of others and their space, yet feel able to explore their world and make mistakes without fear. She physically bullies her husband, calls him worthless and leaves him alone with the baby for days without telling him she's going anywhere. He'll come home from work and she's gone for 3 days in a 5-star hotel with spa treatment. It's awful. It's a little scary to read about this as the father of a 5-month-old. Dude, we're about to have our first baby and this was the wrong thing to read right now. Oh god, maybe I need to reevaluate whether I want to have kids anytime soon. This is a little grueling, isn't it? Rest assured, prospective parents, most kids are just kind of crap bags or unmotivated at some point, but usually it gets better. My son always viewed me only as a milking cow. He doesn't care about anything but his own happiness, and he even refuses to talk to me. If it's still like this when he turns 2, I'm done with the entire affair. I like this one. Made me smile. My parents are disappointed in me because I won't pretend I wasn't damaged from the way they raised me. My mum held getting a degree as one of the pinnacle achievements you can do because it was such a big deal to her going back to school and getting her degree in her 40s. As someone who works in IT, I dropped out about a year into school and I haven't looked back. That was 10 years ago. I hid that I dropped out for many years before I actually told her. She was disappointed, but in my opinion, the astronomical cost of a degree doesn't have a good return on investment, and in IT I've worked up to a very high salary without one. Certifications, mentors, learning on the job and at home. To me, a 4-year degree doesn't make much logical sense in a fast-moving field like this one. My 19-year-old daughter failed out in her first semester of college. Not a big deal. Sometimes freshmen get overwhelmed and don't do so hot in their classes. My daughter, however, just decided to not show up at the classes that weren't theater-related. So she failed math and English, which she could have aced. Now, had she owned up to this, there would have been little issue. Lesson learned, do better on probation and pass the classes next semester. What she did do was just not register for classes for the next semester and try her luck living in the dorms anyway. Illegally. Somehow it took the college 3 months to catch up with her. She finally fessed up in March. By that time, she had been trespassing at the college for those 3 months, and we had to beg them not to throw her into prison. We were literally on the phone with college officials for an hour, begging them to just let her come home. She'd screwed up, but she'd learned her lesson. Luckily, if you can call it that, her grandmother rushed to her rescue and paid off her outstanding balance on her bill. $6,000 for 3 months she lived on campus, boarding and her food card. Her grandmother, my mum, then proceeded to tell my daughter she never had to return to us. We were evil people and she'd protect her from the likes of us. My daughter, who used to call me every night and called me anytime she had problems, just cut all ties with us because facing her responsibilities wasn't a requirement anymore. We tried calling her, tried telling her we weren't angry and to just come home. Nothing doing. We would have been angry, but we would have worked it out. Instead, we became the bad guys in her fairy tale, and for the past 5 months she's gone on shopping sprees, goofed off, and had the time of her life. I've seen her twice since it all happened. Both times she treated me like an evil monster. Both times I went home in tears, despising my mother more and more. My daughter is going back to school tomorrow like nothing has ever happened. My witch of a mum is paying for it. You might be thinking, be grateful she's footing the bill. The problem with that is my oldest daughter has worked her butt off to get her degree, and my mum refused to help her because she's bisexual. My mum is doing this to get back at her for embarrassing her in front of her church. I refused to let the younger daughter get help from her because of this in the past, so my younger daughter has also stabbed her older sister in the back by doing this. I'm so very disappointed in the entitled brat my daughter has become. And if I ever see my witch of a mother again, I'll wring her fat neck right in front of all of those so-called Christians in her church. Well, my son's in prison for life. Although I'm often disappointed in their actions or behavior, I'm never disappointed in my children. This is the most mom answer out of all of them, and it made me smile. My nephews are mama's boys who are in their late 20s and early 30s and still live at home. They went away to college and couldn't hack it for more than a year or two before moving back home. Any girl they date has to have mummy's approval, or they dump her. One girl was the wrong religion, and their mum, my sister-in-law, wouldn't permit her in the house. I forgot to add that the eldest was a professional student. It took him 8 years to figure out what he wanted to do, but hey, it was all in daddy's dime. He went back for his master's, which surprisingly he did complete in 2 years. It's in cybersecurity. He could land a 6-figure job anywhere in the world, but that would require moving out. I'm in my 30s and unmarried. My mum worries every time I take solo holidays. I'm sure she wishes I had a husband to go along. I have a high school-age boy, one of 3 kids, who sometimes jokes that he's disappointing us and that he's kind of a loser, and I feel so awful when he says things like this. If any of you listening ever feel like that, I want you to know that for the overwhelming majority of you, your parents do love you and they care about you, and they're not disappointed in you at all. They just want you to see all of the goodness and possibilities in yourself that they see, so that you can be the happiest version of yourself you can be. You don't need to be some kind of super achiever. You just need to find something, or maybe things, that sparks some kind of joy for you. When basic training goes horribly wrong. The most embarrassing boot camp moments. It's around the 20th of December, and our training instructor decides to make a trainee sing Jingle Bells since he left his key necklace outside of his shirt, which is a big no-no. This trainee had no idea as to what the words were, so he's doing push-ups and he's only saying, "Jingle bells, jingle bells, jingle bells, jingle bells, jingle bells, jingle bells." And he just keeps on going. Our training instructor lets out a primal scream of rage, gets right up in his face, and screams at him, "Jingle all the way, motherfricker." God damn, was that funny. Air Force basic training, we all have jobs around the barracks. Some people are on latrine queen duty, some people's jobs are to align the beds perfectly. My job was to man the utility closet and keep it neat and organized and stocked with chemicals and such for the flight to use when cleaning. It's a very small room with no ventilation. After the first 2 weeks of basic, I pretty much figured out what I was going to eat at every meal, and rarely deviated. Peanut butter packet, honey packet, a piece of bread and half a banana all mashed up together in the bread, and hawked down with a glass of Gatorade. Also usually some other crap depending on the meal. Well, the 5th week of training comes along and something terrible begins to happen to me in the chow line at dinner. No bananas, no honey, and only the crappy white bread. So I changed my meal up. I had the spaghetti and meatballs and some other crap that I'm not sure of 100%. That night on details, I'm manning the utility closet and I feel this terrible gas brewing, or what my current sergeant likes to call bubble gut. I'm trying to hold in this mother of all toots until such a time as I can escape the closet and unleash the beast in the latrine. Apparently, my altered dinner that night did not go along well with my plumbing. I ended up giving up on holding in my gas and just cut a thunderous blast with it. I didn't realize my TI was standing in the hall just outside of my range of view. He was, like most training instructors, ninja silent when calm, but loud as all heck when angry. Well, he heard my weapon-shot loud emission, and before he could walk the 2 steps to get to the closet to yell at me for it, he could smell it as well. He had this charging bull face on when he rounded the doorframe to yell at me, but you could see where he hit the wall of stench. It looked like he ran into a brick wall, as he nearly lost his footing trying to back up and get away from the smell before he recovered his bearing. He starts yelling at me. "Did you duke your frickin' pants, trainee? Holy mother of God, it smells like hot rotting garbage in the Texas sun. Mop 4! Mop 4! Everyone get your frickin' gas masks on here! We have a goddamn chemical attack!" The other trainees started to book it towards their bunks to get their gas masks. I started trying to move out, but he stares me dead in the eyes and says, "No, not you, trainee. You get to sit in there and stew in it." "Yes, sir," I replied. After the cleaning detail was done, he made me go check to see if I'd actually crapped my pants in the bathroom, and then told me I had to stay in the closet until the smell went away. I stayed in the closet for nearly an hour after the details were finished in gas masks. He'd stop by every 5 minutes or so and pop off his gas mask to see if it still smelled. He called me the fart monitor for the remaining of basic, and anytime he smelled a toot, he'd ask me if I was crop dusting. You know what? I feel like I'd rather stand in my own emissions for an extended period of time than have to do heavy cleaning in a gas mask. So even though this is a hilarious punishment, you really got the easy end of the bargain compared to everyone else. Standing in somebody else's toot, though, that's a no-no. Hand me a mask. Several weeks into training, we were getting ready to go to the gas chamber the next day. We got issued our gas masks and then everybody hit the showers. All of a sudden, one of the guys whose bunk is near the latrines starts beatboxing the standard techno bass lane. Unts, unts, unts. Out prances one of our class clowns, wearing only his gas mask, like a banana hammock. Everyone starts dying of laughter until our drill sergeant walks in. He was already mad that we were being loud. "Shut up! Toe the line!" "Oh, what the fudge! You know that's going on your face in a couple of hours, right?" So he smokes the dog crap out of us, and the guy had to keep the mask on, getting it nice and sweaty for the next day. During advanced individual training, I had a slight problem that required some investigative procedures. However, the medical facility at Fort Lee was not sufficient enough, so they shuttled me to Fort Eustis, where their hospital had the sort of facilities that they required. After it was said and done, I was going outside to the smoking gazebo, and there some master sergeant saw me and came right up to me. "Soldier, what the fudge is that on your arm?" Mind you, most sergeants on a training facility play a character, not themselves. They're aggressive, demeaning, and harassing. And while the regulations legitimately say you can't curse at the trainees, it's all up to the commander's discretion. And I was never in a unit, nor encountered a unit where this regulation was in effect. Though in basic, the training company behind us was not allowed to curse at their trainees. It was hilarious hearing what they'd come up with in place of curse words. "Master Sergeant, it's my student leadership badge." I was confused at this point. This Master Sergeant, a man built like a brick wall and a head taller than me, was up in my face about this student leadership badge I was wearing. At Fort Lee, at least when I went there, platoon guides and student first sergeants would wear badges on our arms to show that we're student leadership. They don't do that at Fort Eustis, I guess. So to this Master Sergeant, I was definitely out of uniform, and someone out of uniform needs to be corrected. The alternative is getting us smoking, and I was in no position to get smoked. "You have 5 seconds to un-F yourself, Private. What unit are you in?" And I rattle off my company and all that. "Where the fudge is that? Are you even from Fort Eustis?" "I'm stationed at Fort Lee, Master Sergeant." "Did you get lost or something?" I explained to him that Fort Lee didn't have the medical equipment to perform the procedure. "What procedure was that, Private?" I stumbled. I couldn't frickin' remember the procedure's name. Sigmoidoscopy? There might have been a few more syllables in there. "Frickin' A, Private, I can't even spell that. What did they do to you?" I explained it to him and moved calmly from parade rest to use my hands to describe it. "It's where they take a long, flexible metal tube with a camera and a flashlight, and I put my hands about a meter apart, and they shoved it in my rear end, Master Sergeant." And that's when he broke character. He went from being this pig-headed, unsympathetic butthole back to being a human being. "Holy frick, Private, I'm so sorry. When you go back to Fort Lee, do some combatives or lift some weights. Something manly." And then he points to my battle buddy, because trainees can never go anywhere alone. "You, tell no one what happened." As a bit of advice from the author, if you ever have a colonoscopy or a procedure similar to it, void the air out as soon as possible. I was stuck in that van for 2 whole hours needing to toot harder than I'd ever needed to toot before. Once I got to the bathroom, I knew what a balloon felt like. We had a guy who was sick and on bed rest for a couple of days. The rest of the company was in the quad area doing weapons maintenance. One of the drill sergeants walked into the med bay to grab something from the office. I guess out of pure instinct, the sick guy saw him come in and shouted, "At ease," and jumped to his feet. Problem was, he was tickling his pickle at the time. What followed is possibly one of the most impressive smokings I've ever seen. There was this kid that missed trimming a long piece of thread off his uniform, like 3 or 4 inches long. The drill instructor forced him to trim the thread and keep it as a pet for the remainder of basic training. He had to have it with him at all times. He had to name it. He named it Fred. Occasionally there'd be a random person around and the drill instructor would call him out and make the kid explain who Fred was. It went something like this. "Fred is my pet, sir. I have to water him every day, sir." The instructor made the kid show the stranger how he watered his pet, which involved making the kid unscrew the cap to his canteen, filling the cap with water, and dunking Fred in the water for a few seconds. He had to keep Fred in his pocket at all times, and if he was caught without it, he'd be punished. In short, kid had to keep a long thread he forgot to trim all the way through basic training. He had to water it. So many stories from my time there. His first week of training, one of those soft-spoken, scarecrow-looking guys who was well over 6 feet tall, while being yelled at by a short bulldog of a female drill instructor, who was 5 feet tall with shoulders as wide as she was tall, peed himself in genuine fear. Nobody blamed him though, because when that woman said things like, "I'm gonna eat your face and crap it back into your skull," you damn sure believed she would. This married guy and married girl, though not married to each other, got caught doing the deed in a dumpster behind the mess hall. Careers and marriages ended, knee-deep in rotting food. Then one guy who marched like a puppet. When his right foot went forward, so too did his right arm, and vice versa. He could never figure out how to march properly during the entirety of basic. Our drill instructor intentionally tripped him up before the final parade march, and when he fell, another instructor picked him up and escorted him off the parade grounds to the hospital to check for injury. And after a field exercise, we were all sitting around in the dirt eating MREs while the cadre were explaining covering fire and positioning, when one guy next to me suddenly got a panicked look on his face and ran off into the woods as fast as he could, slapping his legs frantically. When the instructor flipped out asking what in the holy all-loving F he thought he was doing, the guy screamed back, "Fire ants in my pants, sir!" without ever looking back. The sequence of emotions on the instructor's face went from rage to pity to unabashed amusement and back to stoic faster than you can blink. Also, the group of guys I went through basic with had odd names that made for comedic gold when the instructors would yell at them. Some of the best names were Queen, Buttery, Junk, and Wiener. Sadly, none of them got into trouble simultaneously. I don't think I've ever had to work harder in taking out the swear words than when I work on a military story. I wonder if the expression swearing like a sailor originates with naval ones, because everyone in the armed forces seems to tout more expletives than a dictionary in every sentence. Let's see, I've got 2 stories. One guy was in formation and decided to start watching planes fly overhead. He kept leaning back and looking around at the flight patterns, so the instructors pulled him out of formation and yelled at him for a bit. They made him spin in a circle like a radar antenna, point and say, "There," every time he saw an airplane. Then there was the time I was going through the chow hall while a new flight of female trainees was there. They were rainbows, still in civvies and so on. One girl got stopped by our lieutenant, prior enlisted, built like a pile of bricks, and I don't know what he said to her, but she flipped out. Threw her tray to the ground and she started screaming at the lieutenant. She was gesturing wildly when he told her to stow it and go outside or she'd be very sad. So she spits on him and takes a swing. The other instructors pull her down and start getting people the heck out of the chow hall. As my flight forms up and waits for our instructor, who was still inside, a K-9 unit shows up from security forces. The cop comes out, goes inside, and comes out with the girl handcuffed. She's flailing, screaming, and basically going insane. So she kicks his dog, as hard as she can. I heard the thump from 40 feet away. So the dog bites her on the calf. We had some lectures after that one about people trying to go crazy to get out of basic and not to try it. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. Don't forget to subscribe to Am I the Genius? Our platoon had to take our mattresses, sheets, blankets, and pillows outside to the parking area between the barracks. I can't remember what the transgression was that merited this punishment, but probably because the drill instructor thought that the racks weren't tight enough. This is in San Diego in the summer, middle of the day. We had to arrange the mattresses in ranks and columns and make them tidily. Then we all stood on line at attention and the DI would say, "Sweet dreams." At 1,000,000 miles per hour, we got under our sheets and wool blankets in the afternoon sun and yelled, "Sweet dreams, sir!" Then, "Good morning, recruits," followed by, "Good morning, sir!" At which point we hurriedly made our racks and stood at attention. This was repeated over and over for easily more than 10 minutes. I remember there was a handful of civilians walking by who stopped to watch. It wasn't a Friday, which is when family members come for graduation, so I'm not sure who they were or what they were doing. Regardless, there were a couple of girls among them, and I remember thinking that this was not at all in keeping with the hardcore persona that every soon-to-be Marine wants to project. It was also fairly late into boot camp, at the point when recruits are no longer scared and confused, and they have a sort of Stockholm syndrome. And the recruits and drill instructors are feeding each other in this insane, symbiotic relationship of hilarious suffering, and everyone on both sides is trying to suppress a grin and maintain their bearing. So, from the point of view of those civilian onlookers, Marine boot camp is a bunch of men on the brink of giggling, playing make-believe nighty-night time, wishing each other sweet dreams. Before Don't Ask, Don't Tell was repealed, we had a huge dude in our infantry group that was obviously gay. We called him Big Gay Russell. He was a really nice guy and a good soldier, just clearly and obviously gay. He was like a cartoon character, and he thought himself hilarious when towel-snapping our butts while gleefully making his way to the shower, announcing in his best come-hither voice that it was shower time. This offended some of the more religious conservatives in our platoon, and one by one they tried to fight him. Little did they know, Russell was a champion wrestler in high school. One by one they tried, and one by one they got pummeled without mercy by Big Gay Russell. It was hilarious. I don't know what they were thinking. Oh, that huge dude is definitely a queer. Let's try to grapple with him on the ground in our underwear to try to pin him down. He'll hate that. My brother flight got caught having undressed wrestling matches in the showers when I was in basic. Another kid peed himself and marched around for 2 hours thinking that nobody would notice. Another guy shaved off his eyebrows that first night when the TI told him to shave all of the hair off his face. They never did grow back the right way. Ooh, boy do I have one. I was in boot camp, US Marine Corps, and we were having our big uniform inspection. I was standing there at rest with my rifle by my side, waiting to get inspected and asked random questions. All of a sudden, I got the urge to sneeze and clenched up to suppress it. The pressure in my head created the biggest frickin' snot rocket I've ever blown, all over my face. At this point, none of the DIs had seen it, but it was just dripping down my face, and I stood there horrified as my buddy on the other side was just looking back at me in horror. I took my opportunity when nobody was looking and wiped it away ninja style and just had to stand there with my offhand behind my back, trying to dry out all the snot and hide the evidence. Looking back, the whole thing was frickin' hilarious, but at the time I thought I was gonna die. One of the guys in my brother flight wet the bed. He then hid the sheets in an empty locker. He now had no bed sheets, so I don't know how he thought this would fly. After about 2 days, there was an inspection and the TIs were tearing the barracks apart. They discovered the pee-soaked sheets and proceeded to tear apart all the beds, finding the culprit. He then had to stand outside and yell his crime at anyone who came past, proclaiming it for all to know. I've got a couple. In basic, we had this guy from the barrio in LA. Real hardcore Latino gangster type. Guy was a moron and all of the brown rounds were giving him lip for being a hard dude. So we're in the gas chamber and the drill there was you'd take your pro mask off, do 10 push-ups, and then head out into the wind. Well, the drill instructor yells, "Break your seal and assume position." 19 guys drop to front-leaning rest, and barrio guy, yep, he turns around and puts his hand on the wall, all hood of the cop car style. I'd never laughed hysterically while throwing up before, but I did that day. A couple of memorable ones. One guy had a box of contraceptives in his bag. The TI started raging at him. "Didn't you realize this was an all-boys school? You did, didn't you? What are you, some kind of gay slur? Are you planning on sneaking around and trying to get all these guys in the sack? Well," when the TI came around to another guy's bag, he found the guy had bought swim trunks, a mask, swim fins, and a snorkel. "Where did you think you were going when you packed? Club Med? You must have got on the wrong fudging bus." He then ordered the guy to put on all of that stuff, swim fins included, and walk around the barracks for about 15 to 20 minutes going, "Quack, quack." These guys got a lot of ribbing the first few days, but we soon learned that all of us were going to get the same treatment at one point. In short, Johnnies and Quackers. Yeah, I really don't know what Snorkel Guy was thinking loading his one bag full of stuff for a nice day at the beach with his family. Maybe he really did get on the wrong bus. You've got to commend him for holding his silence for that long afterwards. In basic, we had this one dude that had a problem crapping himself. Not like his stomach was upset, accidental code brown, I mean full-on logging his drawers in the middle of the night. And the backstory begins. Anyways, about 2 weeks into basic, we got smart. We had all the mandatory items in our lockers, folded, primed, and ready for inspection. In our laundry closet, we had 3 bags. 2 for clean items we could wear, and 1 for dirty laundry. So one day, laundry crew goes off to do laundry. Rest of the formation does some bullcrap I can't really remember. Anyways, the laundry crew is gone for at least an hour longer than they should have been. As we formed up and the training instructor is hollering at us, the laundry crew walks back out in front of us. Our TI hadn't realized they'd been gone, or something along those lines. So, as they're marching back in front of us, the TI unloads on them. "Where have you been? What have you been doing?" One poor jerk tried to reply without an appropriate reporting statement. The TI flips out again, even harder, and tells them to get to the dorm and be at attention outside his office. After about 10 minutes of typical yelling and 5 minutes of stuttering from the trainees, he gets his answer. They went to do laundry and would typically rewash some clean laundry so they could get some extra time to just chill out and be away from the TIs. As they pulled out the clean whites to rewash, they discovered some tighty-whities with a full-on 6-inch log of doo-doo in them. So, they of course threw them out and rewashed everything. The TI sent them back down to the laundry room with gloves, tongs, and a freezer bag to retrieve said crappy undies. The kid who had the problem crapping never thought about his laundry mark, the identification mark in every piece of clothing. Needless to say, he was washed back to another flight, and this happened 2 more times before they finally just kicked him out. And no, the kid didn't want to get kicked out. He had a brand new, fresh military tattoo in celebration of joining and getting through basic. He just couldn't stop duking himself when he slept. In short, kid poops himself out of the military. Okay, story time. I had to escort a mentally ill person from my flight to the hospital and walk back by myself. When I got back to the barracks, everyone was gone. I sat by the door for like 3 hours waiting when someone from my brother flight said my flight was at the dining hall, which ours was far away. So I walked all the way over there, and they weren't anywhere to be found, so I waited there for like an hour and then went back to the barracks. Turns out they thought I ran away and they were all looking for me. They eventually came back and found me, and my TI told me to stand downstairs and wait for him. Soon, after every TI from the 321st Training Squadron was screaming at me for like over an hour, that didn't really bother me, it was just annoying. They all just left and it was just me and my old TI there. He went over to the field next to our squadron, picked up 5 rocks and said, There are 5 rocks here with the numbers 1 through 5 written on them. Find them. And he threw them all. So here I am at like 9 at night, searching for rocks with my Lackland laser. I checked every damn rock in that field all night while my dorm chief was standing there watching me. Like 10 hours later, I'm still out there searching and I find a pen, but no damned rocks with numbers on them. So I write 1 through 5 on some random rocks and take them up to my dorm and report it to my TI and set the rocks on his desk. He picks them up one by one and examines them very carefully and then says, "Whose rocks are these? These aren't my rocks." All I can think is, oh crud, I'm busted. So I figured what I'd do was lie a little more and say, "Yes sir, these are your rocks." He calmly stands up, sets the rocks on the table and says, "No, these aren't my rocks. My rocks didn't have numbers on them. Go to bed. I hope you learned your lesson." In short, my TI was a jerk. First day of BRM, or basic rifle maintenance, I'm sitting next to a private that I'd already determined to have been clinically brain dead, and we're learning how to break down and function check the M4 carbines. I'm fairly knowledgeable with weapons, and I was very familiar with this particular weapon, so I was helping the guy at the table to my left. I was standing up, I just function checked the 3-round burst after explaining it to the guy, and to my right I hear a click. I look right, and I'm staring down the barrel of a real, functional weapon that Private Idiot had just pulled the trigger on. Instinct told me that he was going to kill me, so I grabbed the rifle from his hands, pulled it away, and without even a thought, I slammed it into the left side of his head. He hits the floor, and I realized what I'd done. I was scared for my life, but then the drill sergeant asks why I did it. I replied with, "Because he killed me." I didn't get in any trouble, but I felt bad for the kid. Not sure if that's what you're looking for, but I was embarrassed by my lack of restraint. When you subscribe, make sure to hit the bell to turn on notifications. Put the playlist on in the background to finish listening to all of the stories. And if you like Am I the Genius, give Am I the Jerk a shot. Everything linked in the description.